Welcome into National Signing Day, class of 2025 here at On3. We're ready to have a great show. Just a big day. It's big when I got JD Piquel sitting right next to me riding shotgun for this one. You guys know JD, right? On3 Recruits channel, or On3 channel. Sorry, you are now on the On3 Recruits channel. But, JD does the hard count. Everybody loves the hard count. Tell them where to find your show real quick.
Yeah, the main On3 YouTube channel is where we're talking college football year round, but this is a blast, a privilege, a pleasure to be talking National Signing Day with you, man. I'm excited to celebrate and put a bow in this class.
Yeah, we cover recruiting year round on this channel, and it's really interesting, JD, because the people that are tuning in right now, we got people that have been following this class, some of these recruits for 2 to 3 years. They've been riding the roller coaster with their team of the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows. And we know if you follow recruiting, you get a lot of highs and you get a lot of lows. Then you also have a group of fans right now that are tuned in for the first time. And this is just like a big present. This is a day where they unwrap it and they say, oh, who are the great new players that we're going to get? So we welcome both sides of the fence, whether you're a diehard recruiting fan or you're just tuning in for the first time, and this is, hey, let's tune in. This is the off season. So, JD, when you were growing up, which side of the fence were you on?
I was on the side of the fence where, obviously I'm in school, right? So high school, middle school, you're scrolling through your laptop, checking your phone, trying to see who's recruiting, who's committed where your class is ranking. So I was definitely on like more the sicko side when it came to the recruiting, but to be a part of this now and to not have to watch a show like this secretly on my device at work and to do it with you is a blast. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, you guys let us know in the comment section below, right? Sicko or casual?
There you go.
Are you a casual or are you a sicko? Because we're here for both, and we're going to get into it today. We got a cast of characters, not just JD Piquel, but we have the experts, Chad Simmons and Steve Wiltfong. They're gonna help us get through today's show. We're gonna, today, as we sit here on February 5th, National Signing Day, there's not many decisions being made, but we're going to put a bow on this class. We're going to put a cherry on top. We're going to dot the I's. We're going to cross some T's. But most of all, we are here to celebrate this 2025 class, this 2025 cycle. So we're going to get into all these teams, what they landed, where the surprises were, who were the big flips. We're going to get into it all. Today's going to be a really, really fun day.
Josh, you comped today to sort of a Christmas morning vibe if you're a casual.
Right.
If you are a Michigan fan that is sort of loosely kept up with recruiting, you woke up this morning, saw one last present under the tree, and that is Ty Haywood.
Oh, boy, that is Ty Haywood. So let's get into what we are tracking as of today. So there's a couple things that we are tracking, and one of them is offensive lineman Ty Haywood, the number 48 overall prospect in America. He's a top 10 player in his position, and you can see why. 6'5", 297 pounds. He's from Denton, Texas, and this morning Chad Simmons had the news. So let's go to Chad Simmons here and talk a little Ty Haywood to Michigan. Chad, I know you spoke to him. I saw the quotes in the story that you posted on on3.com. What was behind Ty Haywood's decision?
Obviously, I think we all know that NIL was involved here. Of course, how big of a factor we never really know, but it definitely played a role. Michigan went in big and gave him some hesitation back in late November, didn't sign with Alabama in December, then took that OV in January to Michigan. And other schools were trying to be in the mix. Florida State tried to get back in, Mississippi State. Steve and I both heard a lot about Texas Tech as well, making a run there, trying to get him on campus to Lubbock. But in the end, Michigan just checked those boxes from a football program, from life after football to academics, from the NIL to playing with a guy like Bryce Underwood. And I think what really hit home for him was playing for a head coach like Sharon Moore, who has coached offensive line, knows that position very well. They developed a lot of players under Sharon Moore at Michigan. So I think all that combined is what put Michigan on top in the end.
Yeah, a huge addition. And, JD, we weren't going to talk much about movement in the top 10 or the top 20, but Michigan, they're moving. Ty Haywood moves them from 9 to 6 in the On3 industry rankings. Oh, there you go. Look at Michigan. They move up 3 spots today with the addition of Ty Haywood. Just an incredible class because for much of it, they were kind of mired in that 18 spot, 20. Sometimes they were outside the top 20, but obviously, and we're going to talk way more Michigan as we get into this with the Bryce Underwood flip and all the momentum that they carry into the 2025 offseason. But Michigan currently sitting at number 6. All right, what else are we tracking today? Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong for this one because I want to ask him about edge Zahir Mathis. He's a top 150 prospect from Philadelphia. Steve, we thought it would be FSU kind of in the weeks prior, but he took a last-minute official visit this past weekend. What's going on with Zahir Mathis? Where do we think he's going to end up?
Well, we talked about Maryland looming with that official visit over the last weekend of the recruiting process and said, beware of Mike Loxley and the Terrapins if you're Florida State. And he left College Park favoring Maryland. Florida State trying to get that momentum back over the last 2 days. Talked to a source around Tallahassee this morning that did not feel good about the traction that they were trying to make up in the Zahir Mathis sweepstakes.
All right, so the former Ohio State commitment is going to make his decision after our show. So we will not have breaking news on Zahir Mathis today, but that the former Ohio State commitment is going to make a decision later on today. Now, one prospect that did make a decision is Onis Konanbany. The former Tennessee commitment elected not to sign with the Volunteers during the early signing period. Chad Simmons, let's bring in Chad here. Last night, he flipped his commitment to Florida. What do you think was behind this? Why Tennessee? Why couldn't they hold on to him?
Look, I think, just the way Onis put it to me was, Josh, that he felt Florida wanted him more. Now, look, he loved Tennessee. He committed there, and he was committed pretty strongly for a long time. And leading up to that OV to Florida in November, I mean, he told me that he really almost didn't take that trip. Steve and I have heard this before where the car's been out there to pick up recruits and they don't get in that car. They leave that car out there and they end up not going anywhere. Onis gave it some thought. That car sat there, he said like an hour and a half. He decided to go out, get in the car, take the OV to Florida. And that definitely opened his eyes. He still, weighed his options and thought about signing with Tennessee or Florida in December. Mm-hmm. He went back to Florida in middle of December. And that's really where, Florida kind of took control of this recruitment and got him back on campus around the players. He was back in January again. And this has kind of been done for about a month and a half. He knew he was going to Florida for some time. And just the connection with Will Harris, Billy Napier, that staff, showing him their plan. I think the momentum they had the second half of the season, the wins over Ole Miss, LSU, Florida State, kind of closing out strong. And then the momentum from the early signing period as well. I mean, he knows those guys, Vernell Brown, Dallas Wilson, guys like that. So I think all those things factored into Florida taking Konanbany from Tennessee.
All right, Chad, don't go too far. We're going to talk to you about this next one as well. Javari Flowers. Follow me here. Javari Flowers. If you don't know the name, it's okay. He's new to the 2025 cycle. Just last Wednesday, he reclassified himself from the 2026 class. So we thought his recruitment was just about to get started. Mm-hmm. No, wrong. It's about to end. The Miami Northwestern DB is now a part of the 2025 cycle. We think, well, I'm going to ask Chad about the favorites here because his recruitment now is not going to end today. It sounds like it's going to end in the spring, so a couple more weeks, maybe months. But, Chad, what is the latest on Javari Flowers' top teams now that he's a part of this 2025 class?
Yeah, I think we'll continue to gather information, I think, in the coming weeks. I think this dead month is a good month for him to kind of his plan and his circle tell me to kind of sit back and figure out OVs, how many, who gets them, what dates they can work him in for March, maybe into April if they need to. Steve talked to Flowers coming off the Georgia visit this past weekend. Georgia's in the mix. I think based on who I talked to and my sources there, I feel like it'll be hard for Georgia or any other school to get him out of the state of Florida. Florida State, and Miami, all three are in the mix. We think all three have a chance to get an OV. Miami's had the momentum. When he was a 2026 recruit, he came out and just flat out said at the Under Armour All-America game that Miami was his top school. He's been there a lot. That's in his backyard. He plays at Northwestern High School in Miami. He knows the staff. But one I'm hearing a lot about also is University of Florida. They're very much in the mix. I would put Miami and Florida, based on my intel, as those top two heading into the OVs, with Florida State, Georgia, Syracuse, some other schools in the mix.
All right, let's bring in expert Steve Wiltfong because we had breaking news right before we came on live. AJ Tuitele, linebacker from Las Vegas. Now, he did sign with Washington State, but when Jake Dickert left to become the head coach at Wake Forest, Well, he got out of that letter of intent. Steve, we just had big news. AJ Tuitele off the board to USC. Take us behind the scenes of this one.
Well, USC got him on an official visit, did a great job, did a great job recruiting him, led by Deontin Lynn and company. And USC just added the number one player in the state of Nevada, a big riser in the recent On3 player rankings by Charles Power and Cody Belair. He had 196 tackles as a senior, guys, 39 tackles for loss, a very disruptive, rangy sideline-to-sideline player as USC tries to continue to rise the ranks of the Big Ten. Defense has been a point of emphasis for Lincoln Riley and company over the last 2 years, revamping his entire coaching staff. Now bringing in a top 15 recruiting class that is heavy on the defensive side of the ball. And this young man is as exciting a recruit coming to USC this cycle. He's the last one in the fold, but might be one of the first you hear about on the field.
All right.
Wow.
So
It's high praise.
yeah, very high. And you saw some of those highlights. I mean, we're still talking about some really talented athletes finishing out some classes here. And in the meantime, let's reset things. Let's take a look at the rankings. Let's bring them in. So here we go. I mean, this is pretty much final at this point. I mean, we're going to have maybe a couple commitments, but I don't think there's going to be anything the rest of the day that necessarily impacts this list. Now, if Zahir Mathis does commit to Florida State, maybe they jump a spot, maybe Ole Miss and Florida State swap there. But look at number one. You got the Texas Longhorns, JD. We're going to break this class down. But what if you're a recruit and you're looking and Texas is recruiting you? That's going to be hard to turn down at this point.
I mean, I think just looking at the trend of what they've been on the field in of itself, I mean, made the playoff in the 4-team model for good measure their first year in the SEC. They play for the conference title and, by the way, make the 12-team playoff format. I think Steve Sarkisian, when he got to Texas, the question all of us had is, well, is he going to be able to really build a roster? We know he can call plays. We know he's the quarterback guy. We know he can recruit quarterbacks, but can he build a real roster? And I think this past season, and honestly, the pivot from what they lost from the year before, they're a real deal, like line of scrimmage football team. They lost 2 All-Americans in the middle of that defense, and they were still top 15 in rush yards allowed per game the following season in 2024. So they have a real deal staying power to them. That strikes me, and I think Steve Sarkisian deserves a lot of credit for how he's built them to last in the SEC for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why they're so popular in recruiting is because they play their freshmen.
Yeah,
and
that's
we've
true.
seen that. So let's talk about who could be the next freshman to make an impact at Texas. And we are looking here at, this is their top recruit. So of these guys, I think Lance Jackson has a real shot. Talking with Charles Powers, the number 2 edge in the country, number 28 overall. So we're talking 5-star talent. Lance Jackson kind of reminds me of Colin Simmons, and you saw what Colin Simmons came in and did as a freshman. I think Lance Jackson can do the same. Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong here. Steve, when we talk about impact freshmen, you got a Lance Jackson, but you also got some really talented wide receivers coming in, including Kalik Lockett, Jamie French. Cade Phillips was a huge late flip for Texas. What do you think about impact players from this class?
Well, Texas had the nation's number 3 ranked defense this past year, Josh. They loaded up on the defensive side of the ball this class. I think they can be even better defensively this coming fall, and a lot of it has to do with some of these true freshmen that they have coming in. How about Jonah Williams, the number 1 safety in the country, the biggest Swiss Army knife in this cycle, can do a lot of things in the back 7 of the defense, can play safety, can give you some coverage ability at nickel, can come down and blitz off the edge. You talk about surprises that they had in this recruiting cycle. Jonah Williams is a guy that was trending Oklahoma at one time, then trending Texas A&M and LSU. Texas gets him on campus at the end of the summer and flips that recruitment led by Blake Gideon, and they get a guy to come on their defense and someone that gives them a lot of versatility where they don't have to change the personnel on the field with Jonah Williams.
Josh, I want to interrupt really quick. Speaking of surprises for Jonah Williams, we're trying to record a commitment video for where Jonah Williams is going to end up at. And usually you have it down to like 2, maybe max 3 schools of where they could be. Steve and I recorded, I want to say 4 or 5 potential commitment videos for Jonah Williams. So for Texas to win out there and land his services, huge.
Well, I also think baseball played into it, right? So it kind of, you're trying to get a read for his football recruitment, but knowing that baseball also factors in, and yeah, different baseball coach. Who did he have the best relationship with? Oregon? Was it? I mean, in the end, he ends up at Texas. He's going to be a star on the football field. He's going to play baseball. Really exciting. But I think the biggest surprise in this class, and I want to bring in Chad Simmons for this, was the signing of defensive lineman Justus Terry. For the majority of the cycle, it was Georgia all the way until the end. Chad, how did Texas pull Justus Terry out of the state of Georgia?
I mean, I don't know how else to say it, Josh. I mean, probably just a straight up better NIL package. That's kind of what it came down to. I mean, Justus Terry obviously had the better, much longer connections, in Athens with Trey Scott, Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, multiple off the field staffers. He had been there to Athens too many times to count. Texas got involved, in the fall. Obviously in the summer, communication picked up. They got him on campus for an OV. Even coming off the OV, we knew Texas was a player, but didn't think they were going to be that kind of player, come early December. So I just think, obviously, what you guys have talked about, Texas's success on the field, building guys in the trenches, him seeing a guy like Colin Simmons as a true freshman make the impact he had this year, them being back-to-back playoff contenders the last 2 years. All that obviously played into it as well. And he likes the staff, the player development. There's no questioning that, but I think just the simple answer is the better NIL package won out.
Yeah, hey, Texas doesn't hide it. I mean, you can't hide money. Most teams have like oak trees leading the way up to the facility. Texas has Lambos.
I mean, Lambos probably moves the needle a little bit more with high schoolers than oak trees would be my guess. But here's my thing, Josh. Like, I think a lot of people, whenever they lose out on a recruit, whether I'm not specifically speaking here to Georgia, but just anyone in general, the go-to, reason is, they just bought him. They just bought him. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, you could have bought him too. Right. You could have put together a better NIL package for a Justus Terry or whoever we're talking about here and made the pitch to bring him to your school. So if it's about money, maybe you don't like where we're at, but this is where we're at, and I don't have a problem with it. For Justus Terry getting what he's worth, I'm here for it.
Well, what's your threshold sometimes is the answer, right? Because there was a lot of confidence around Auburn coming out of his official visit. Coming into that final day, that they could also land Justus Terry. I talked to a source around Athens. The family told them that they were good on Wednesday. I think they still felt good on Thursday. And then Coach Trey Scott walks into the office on Friday and heard they didn't feel so good anymore about Justus Terry. Same with Jonah Williams. Look, I think that Texas landing Jonah Williams had a lot to do with NIL and the pitch that they were able to make at the end of the summer, the potential that he would have, those earnings in Austin. That's how they closed two of the biggest recruitments in this class, in my opinion. But you also have to give them an opportunity to reach their potential on the field. These guys want to play at the highest levels. They want to sign multiple contracts in the NFL, and Texas can point to a hard-nosed, exciting style of defensive play and a track record of development. But you're not even in these conversations for Jonah Williams and Justus Terry if you're not bringing major NIL opportunities.
Right. And remember, other programs did come after Texas recruits. I mean, Florida Gators made a run at Jamie French all the way down to the end where on early signing day, we weren't surprised. Now, Jamie French sent his letter of intent in at 7 a.m., so he squashed all rumors real quick. But, I mean, Jamie French didn't just suddenly have interest in UF because they had a major that he likes,
Sure.
Jamie French was probably offered top dollar in something very competitive. But then when it comes down to it, if money's equal, well, it reverts back to relationships and it reverts back to the style of offense that they play. So, I think while Texas is able to kind of flex their NIL muscle, they're also, like Steve said, providing opportunity to go on to the next level and make even more money. So, Texas fans, talk to JD and I. Get in the comments section. What do you think the strength of this class was? Did Texas meet their needs in 2025? Let us know. All right. We're going to hit on all the teams.
I love it. Let's do it.
We're going to stay in order here of the top 5. Then we're going to kind of bounce around. So let's talk Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs, they finished number 2. Now, I thought, the experts thought, maybe even you thought, that Georgia was going to finish number one in this cycle. They did not get to number one, but boy, do they bring in a great class. Look at all these number ones at their position. I mean, there's only one best player at their position, and they land 4 number ones at their position. If you guys see the plus sign next to the 5-star, that is called a 5-star plus. That means all 4 industry ranking services have them as a 5-star. There's not many of these guys that are basically consensus 5-stars, but when you see that logo, that's what it means. So we got some great players on here, and we're going to talk impact freshmen first. And I want to bring in Chad Simmons here. Chad, you are very familiar with this Georgia recruiting class. You live in Georgia. You cover the recruiting nationally, but there's so much talent in the Peach State, and Georgia was able to hold a lot of it home.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the in-state guys. I mean, going from, Elijah Griffin to Zayden Walker to Elias Williams to Juan Gaston. I mean, even C.J. Wiley. The list goes on. I mean, obviously Kirby has a national brand at Georgia and recruit the best players in the country from coast to coast, but he wants to start in his home state and start in his own backyard in the state of Georgia. And, I think you have to start with Elijah Griffin as far as being that guy. I've seen him so many times going back to even 8th grade, then his career at Savannah Christian playing for a state championship, and then capping it off with a great performance at the Under Armour All-America game. And I know Charles and Cody raved about his performance there in Orlando as well. And I think obviously expectations are extremely high for a guy like Elijah, who I think they plan to play likely this coming season in that rotation on defensive line. So, and I think for me, when I look at this class just as a whole, one thing I see is I think this could potentially be the best wide receiver group, Georgia signs. You see right there on the screen, Talon Taylor. I mentioned C.J. Wiley. You talk about a pass-catching tight end like Elias Williams. You have a guy like Landon Roldan, who's a playmaker in the Peach State. You have Tyler Williams from Tampa, Florida. They want to change that receiver room and get more playmakers, guys that can stretch the field, make big plays, and somewhat scare defensive coordinators in that room. So Coley and company did a great job there. This cycle, they added guys in the portal as well at that position too. So they want to really make that room a kind of a changeover. They've done a great job, I feel like, with that this cycle, mainly playmaker guys at the receiver and tight end position.
Yeah, and that's where they need it. JD, we've seen Georgia try to find playmakers through the portal, through whatever it is, but it seems like it's still high school recruiting is where the bulk of the impact players Georgia finds.
And that's what gets me excited about this class, like Chad just mentioned. Like if I'm a Georgia fan, I look at what happened last year on the field, what we were trying to do. We throw it 36 times a game. We lead America in drops. I'm like, hey, if you can play, I don't care what age you are. Like Taylor, let's get ready to ball, baby. C.J. Wiley, get ready to take some reps because they need help at that position, and that's what they want to do offensively is push the ball downfield.
Steve, I want to talk a little bit about Talon Taylor. He's a guy that Charles Power, director of scouting and ranking here at On3, identified early. He was an On3 outlier for much of the process. Finishes up at number 4 at the position. But what did we specifically at On3 see from Talon Taylor early to think that he is a top 25 player in the entire country?
Well, he took a huge jump as a senior at a massive senior year, 84 catches, 1,617 yards. That's 20 yards per catch. In the end zone, a ton, just a dynamic playmaker, a guy that has instant impact playmaking ability for a Georgia team that was not up to par from what we typically see from a Georgia team. They grinded out the season, win the SEC championship, but we're used to seeing Georgia ranked top 10 offensively and top 10 defensively at the same time. 51 in total offense this year, number 30 in total defense. They couldn't run the ball at all. 102 in rushing offense. A guy like Talon Taylor comes in, C.J. Wiley, they help you open up the run game. Some of these offensive linemen that they landed, Juan Gaston, these are guys that you can run the ball behind. A very, very physical point of attack player that kind of fits the standard that we've seen Georgia recruit the offensive line historically. So this is a class that Kirby Smart and company are hoping to get Georgia back on track. And Talon Taylor, C.J. Wiley, those are two of the biggest need gets that any program in the SEC had this cycle when you're talking about a Georgia team that didn't play up to their standard this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chad, what do you think the biggest surprise in this class is? And it's easy to go with Justus Terry signing with Texas over Georgia, but and maybe it is. But in your opinion, what do you think the biggest surprise from this class is?
Obviously Terry for sure was a huge blow to Georgia and a big surprise.
Let's stay
to them.
positive today, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, as big a need as receiver was, and that was a big focal point in this class, no doubt about that. I think secondary is a big need too. So adding a guy like Dominic Kelly, a one-time USC commit, also a one-time 2026 recruit. He reclassified. He flipped to Georgia. I think adding that body in that room was somewhat of a surprise to that class. It kind of materialized pretty quickly mid-season. He took an OV to Georgia, got all his paperwork set, reclassified, signed early. So I think that was somewhat of a surprise in this class because when the season started, people saw Dominic as a four-star 2026 DB at IMG, committed to USC. Then he flips to 2025 and flips to Georgia. So a nice surprise for Georgia in this class.
All right, Steve, let's wrap this Georgia segment up. A lot of people are probably wondering, why isn't there a more hyped quarterback in this group? But Ryan Montgomery committed to Georgia before the season began. He committed during the season. Why do we not hear more about Ryan Montgomery throughout the cycle, Steve?
Well, he got hurt as a senior. He was a guy that was one of the first in the class to emerge nationally. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State offering in the Midwest, but he had offers from coast to coast. Ended up picking Georgia over Florida. There was some buzz there at the end that the Gators were trying to flip him and have a 2-quarterback class with Tramel Jones, but he stuck it out with Georgia. Georgia went out and also landed in-state recruit Hezekiah Melender at the position as they try and add more competitive depth to a quarterback room that also didn't play to the standard that they were used to this year, Josh. But Ryan Montgomery, hurt as a senior, looking forward to getting going in spring ball at Georgia and getting back on track under Coach Bobo, Coach Montgomery, Van Gorder and company. And as we put a bow on this Georgia video, 5 top 100 players in the front 7 of this Georgia class, headlined by Elijah Griffin and Isaiah Gibson, the number 1 defensive lineman, the number 1 edge rusher. Zayden Walker's the number 1 linebacker in the country. They go out and beat Chase Linton. And then Darren and Kennebong from New Jersey was one of their top overall players on the board to beat Ohio State and Oregon, programs like that for Darren. Those are guys that we're accustomed to seeing Georgia get a lot of length, a lot of size, a lot of ferocity at the point of attack.
Well, looking at Georgia here, Josh, like as we zoom out and put a bow on the 2025 cycle, a good word to describe the past season on the field was hectic, right? Yeah. We're okay, this team's the best. This team's going to, there's a million different teams we talked about. It felt like that were the number 1 team on the field. And Georgia at one point in time, kind of got caught up in the the lack of what they had on that roster and, didn't achieve their expectations preseason. So what I think about this class and when I think about Georgia coming away as them have the number 2 class in 2025, Georgia's still Georgia, Kirby's still Kirby. They're not going anywhere.
No,
they're not going anywhere.
They aren't going anywhere. And Georgia fans, talk to us. What do you think the biggest need that the Bulldogs filled was, and who are you most excited about? Let us know in the comment section below. Now we're going to talk some Alabama recruiting. They were the number 3 team in the country. Kalen DeBoer's first true cycle is Alabama head coach, and he finishes 3rd in the country, JD.
Yep.
And he made some noise. I mean, from East Coast to West Coast, Alabama was involved, and they hit their stride over the summer, which I thought was interesting because in the day and age of recruits coming on the On3 Recruits channel to make their decision or setting a specific date where they announce from their auditorium in front of 550 students, like these guys visited Alabama and just went home and said, I'm ready to commit. You had Jackson Lloyd do that. You had Dijon Lee. You had Michael Carroll. You had a lot of these guys throughout the summer that something struck them to where, hey, I just want to get this over with and end it, and Alabama finishes with the top 3 class.
And that was the question I think all of us had when Kalen DeBoer got the job. Like, put us all back in that spot where we hear that they're hiring him from Washington. Everyone's asking, whoa, okay, did that thing at Washington. That's great, but you're in the SEC now. You're going
Right.
to be in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the standards are as high as they are in college football. Can he recruit? We all know he can coach ball. Can he recruit? His first cycle, top 3. I think he can recruit just fine.
And there was a lot of criticism of, well, can he recruit the South?
Sure.
You're bringing these Washington guys in. Can he recruit the South? Yeah, he can recruit the South, but he can also still recruit California and Florida, and they went into Jersey, they went into Texas, they did a phenomenal job of recruiting coast to coast. Now we're going to break it down and talk about some of these impact players. Obviously, one of the biggest names on the board was Keelan Russell, the quarterback from Houston, Texas, or from Duncanville, Texas, flips his commitment from SMU to Alabama. Steve Wiltfong, we followed this recruitment from the early period where SMU really thought they were going to hold on to him until the end when he flipped to Alabama. Talk about Keelan Russell just as a prospect. Talk about his rise in this cycle.
Well, he's the Gatorade National Player of the Year, threw for 4,177 yards as a senior and 55 touchdowns. He also brings some dual threat ability, and he continued to get better each season from junior film to seeing him at the Elite 11 finals in the summer, to then seeing him on the field as a summer. You continue to see growth as a passer. He got stronger. His ability to see the field, make quick decisions, be accurate with the football. Obviously, he had some great playmakers around him, like the number 1 receiver in the country, DeCorian Moore. But he's a hell of a maestro, and he's uber competitive. That's what led him to Alabama. He committed to SMU early before his recruitment blew up. Chose SMU over Baylor, TCU, and some other regional programs. Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama staff, they get to Tuscaloosa. They have to get prepared for spring ball and winter workouts. They got to hit the portal. They got to finish up that previous recruiting cycle. But in the spring, they went out and saw a bunch of quarterbacks. Keelan Russell was the guy that they fell in love with the most at Duncanville. Nick Sheridan and company offered him a scholarship. They got him on an official visit in June and closed the deal. In between that, look, a lot of these recruits, we talked about a lot of these recruits taking NIL money and that being the difference in a recruitment. I think that in this case, he took less money to go to Alabama on the front end, banking on himself, hitting big on the back end, playing in the biggest games in college football, having a chance to win the Heisman Trophy at Alabama, having a chance to play with and against some of the best athletes in college football, seeing what Kalen DeBoer and those guys did with Michael Penix at Washington. They were annually a top 5 offense in the country under Coach DeBoer, top 5 scoring offense, top 5 passing offense. And he sees himself thriving under that coaching staff, playing on the big stage. It was an old school recruiting win for Alabama. They had to hold off LSU, Colorado, Texas A&M, some programs that came in at the end with some sweet opportunities themselves. But I think Keelan Russell took less to go to Alabama, betting on himself. And I think he sees an opportunity to play right away, too. Obviously, Jalen Milrow's gone. He's going to get a chance to go in there and compete with Austin Mack and Ty Simpson and company. I think he thinks he can get on the field as a true freshman.
All right. We're going to talk more some impact freshmen as well. Dijon Lee, I think the corner from California is going to be one. Potentially some of these offensive linemen. But Chad, I want to ask you about Alabama's ability to go into the state of California and land some of the best players. I know you make a run through California a couple times a year and you talk with these guys, but what's Alabama got that these Cali recruits are buying?
Championships, player
That's a good
development, NFL draft, trophies, and the hardware they have, the rings. They have a lot. I think in this class alone, you spoke of like Dijon Lee, a guy that, I like a lot. I've seen him a lot at Mission Viejo out in California, from them playing there to practices to Under Armour camps to 7-on-7 with Trillion Boys and different things like that. I think he's number 15 in the country overall, number 4 corner, number 1 in California. He's 6'3 plus, 190-ish pounds. I saw him play first game of the season this year back in August against Santa Margarita. He has an interception. He has a punt return for a touchdown. He has an 80-yard catch on a post route at wide receiver. A great athlete, a lot of potential. Not many guys that size can play the way he does. And kind of going back to what you asked about the California success is one of his first offers was from the University of Washington. So that staff coming over with Courtney Morgan and company, DeBoer, obviously the head coach, other guys coming with him, then putting a guy like Mo Linquist, that defensive back coach. But that all played in Dijon Lee, looking at Alabama, eventually signing with Alabama. But with the West Coast, those guys have been recruited by Washington the same way they have been by Alabama. DeBoer and company recruited those guys early. Like they said, the last year and a half, I've been following these guys, Josh, when we started the show. They've been recruiting these guys for the last 2 and 3 years also. Yeah. Those connections came over. And then with a guy like Dijon or other California guys, you see a guy like Damani Jackson starting corner on one side. He's from Mater Dei. Zabian Brown, another true freshman corner from Mater Dei, California, starting on the other side at corner. You've had a guy like Bryce Young come from there and have success. So, look, Bama's a national brand. They're bringing a staff from the West Coast. Those things combined help them have success in California.
Yeah, if I'm In-N-Out Burger, Josh, might think about maybe getting a presence in Tuscaloosa. All the Californians finding their way out there. They asked, can you recruit the South, was the question. Yeah. He can. Southern California, he's been owning it.
I like that. Yeah, the South. Hey, the South is anywhere. All right, JD. Big news this week. Ryan Grubb hired as OC. How is Ryan Grubb going to come in and use these weapons that Alabama has amassed, especially with these offensive wide receivers?
Yeah, I think in a word, aggressive. Like we all have visions of what they did during that national title season where they lost to Michigan in the final game. But like Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, two dudes that went in the first round of the NFL draft. So I think aggressive, shots downfield, putting strains on not just the vertical presence of a defense, but the width of a defense as well to try and create matchups.
So the offense is going to look a little different.
It's going to be a little more explosive. And the thing, too, speaking of Keelan Russell, when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, yes, it's going to be Kalen DeBoer's offense carrying over from the year before, but to just have a new set of eyes and to kind of have it be an open competition where everyone's trying to get acclimated to the verbiage and things of that nature could kind of be the path for Keelan Russell to play early.
Yeah. And a different quarterback.
Different quarterback.
Different style quarterback. Yeah. Much different style. All right. Alabama fans, I want to hear from you. What letter grade do you give Kalen DeBoer in his first full cycle at Alabama? I know you guys are tough graders, so let me know. Comment section below. Leave the letter grade that you give Kalen DeBoer. Let us know. All right. We're going to talk. What do we want to talk next? Well, we're going in order here. So we're going to talk the Oregon Ducks. Now, the Ducks had a monster cycle. What a fun ride this was. We can talk to Corian Moore, Trey McNutt, Naeem Offord. I mean, there was so many fun spins to this class, but the Oregon Ducks, they were always in position too to finish number 1 overall. Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong here. Steve, we've had a blast covering Dan Lanning and his staff in the 2025 cycle. What do you make of this class? What do you think their strength is? What do you think they did really well?
Well, I think that obviously they went out and signed one of the top defensive back classes in the country. You're talking about flipping Naeem Offord from Ohio State, beating Auburn in the process, beating the Buckeyes for Trey McNutt and Dorian Brew as well. Trey McNutt, the number 2 player in the state of Ohio, number 2 safety in the land. Dorian Brew, a versatile defensive back that can do a lot of things in your secondary. The way Dan Lanning wants to play defense, you have to be able to play man in the secondary. You got to be able to erase mismatches with your defensive backs. There's a lot of length and a lot of fluidity and a lot of guys that can play in space, playmakers in the secondary. And then they got weapons on offense. Obviously, it starts with the nation's number 1 receiver, Corian Moore. But running back was a need for them this cycle. They went out and landed one of the Midwest best, D'Air Hill, who is dynamite with the ball in his hands. Vander Plug was a big tight end pull for them at the end of the cycle, flipping him from Washington. So secondary, offensive skill positions, big for Oregon. And what they did in the portal and on the trail, from an offensive line standpoint, they're going to lose 6 of their top 7 offensive linemen. Guy like Douglas Utu, they think can physically come in and play right away as well. So when you have the number 4 class in the country, there's a lot to digest there. But secondary, skill talent on offense, and offensive line define this class for Oregon.
Absolutely. Chad, what stands out to you? I mean, there are so many big surprises in this class, but what recruitment really stands out to you when we talk Ducks?
I mean, the recruitment probably is the one they flipped and the one they held on. Obviously, Naeem offered. I mean, Steve and I both worked that one like up until
Yeah.
literally the minute that it happened. And right there, we were with you guys right there in Nashville
Mhm.
when everything kind of played out that morning. But I think Naeem offer was huge. A lot of confidence at Auburn leading up to that. The final days of that decision was huge. And I think on the other side, I mentioned this back in December, was them being able to hold on to a guy like Brandon Finney, who was coveted by many other schools, number one being Penn State, where he has multiple connections. The staff there felt very good about flipping him at one time during the season. I think Brandon even felt better about Penn State at one time than Oregon. Oregon got him back out there on their off week in November, and that ended up being crucial for them to kind of hold him in this class to put together, like what Steve said, an elite secondary group with Trey McNutt, Dorian Brew, Naeem Offord, Brandon Finney. And I also love what they did in the state of Florida. I mean, Steve mentioned flipping Gavin Nix, a very instinctive physical linebacker coming out of IMG, flipping from Miami, and then getting a guy like Zaire Addison, a very physical kid from Tampa, in the Carrollwood Day school, just a guy that loves to lean on people, use that big body, that power. So going into Florida to get two of the best in the Sunshine State, again, shows what kind of brand, national brand Oregon is.
Yeah, a big brand out there in Eugene. So we're going to talk right now about one of the craziest recruitments, I think, of the entire cycle. We're talking Jaron Kiwi Sagapatelli.
Pronunciation is on point there. That's big time. That's big time
That
play
is big
by
time.
you.
I'm a professional. But he had a phenomenal senior year. Wasn't that highly sought after, committed to Cal early, but had a phenomenal senior year. We start hearing whispers that Oregon's involved. Oregon offers. They jump on board. Georgia offers with 2-3 weeks to go in the cycle. He's staying strong to Cal, but on early national signing day, Sagapatelli flips his commitment from Cal to Oregon. It was a crazy recruitment, but it doesn't stop there. Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong and talk a little Sagapatelli. What happened after he signed with the Ducks in the early signing period?
Well, he enrolled and just didn't feel comfortable in Eugene and wanted to go somewhere else where he had a chance to play right away, and that's Cal. And that's what Cal pitched to him at the end of the recruiting cycle when they were trying to hang on to him. And I also think that Cal got their ducks in a row from an NIL perspective to be competitive in that arena as well, because this is a guy that down the stretch, Oregon absolutely coveted, a guy that they viewed as a championship level caliber quarterback. He had a fantastic senior year, had a fantastic career. He's the state of Hawaii's all-time passing leader. He's number 2 in touchdowns. But he enrolled at Oregon, didn't feel at home, and went back to the program that was on him early, that he was committed to throughout his process, and a program that lost their quarterback in the portal, Mendoza, who ultimately went to Indiana. There's a chance for him to come right in at Cal and be the face of that program as a true freshman.
Yeah, and I thought this was a really crazy story because, like, I know we at the top of the show, we said we're going to have sickos here and we're going to have some casuals. You had to be there for the Jaron Key Sagapatelli recruitment. Like, that was one of those things where I know it sounds dramatic, but if you were involved in it, if you were watching it as it happened, I remember. So he enrolled at Oregon. He participated in bowl practice. I think he even watched their first playoff game, and then he bounces. So to me,
he went in the portal.
Yeah, he went in the portal, right?
Yeah, it was not a decommitment. He's first portal guy of the 2025 class. And look, when he committed to Oregon on Wednesday morning, while Chad and I were sitting there in the studio, he was dark on Oregon for 48 hours. They did not know that they were getting him until he called beforehand and said he was coming. Obviously, they were very excited about that, but the intel was favoring Cal coming up to that decision. So I think as he was praying about it and talking it over with his family, seeing what Dylan Gabriel did at Oregon, Will Stein and his track record of offense, the stage Oregon plays on. They were the number 1 team in the country at that time. They had some really good NIL opportunities in place for him. He just bought into it. But then when he got into Eugene, he just wasn't comfortable and went in the portal and went back to the place that led for the majority of his recruitment in Cal.
Yeah. So, JD, he essentially Like I said, he enrolled, he put the pads on,
Yeah.
he was ready to go. He essentially got a look under the hood.
Sure. Saw
And
behind the curtain a little
saw
bit.
the engine.
Yeah.
So if you're an Oregon fan, I think the way I would look at this is, what does this mean for what is Sagapelli's decision to leave mean about the quarterback position at Oregon?
I don't doubt what Steve is saying is 100% true in terms of him feeling more comfortable somewhere else and wanting to play earlier. But the play earlier part is fascinating because Dante Moore was a high-profile guy out of high school, goes to UCLA, decides he wants to sit a year. Tez Johnson, who caught 80 passes the last 2 years for Oregon, played with Dylan Gabriel this past year and Bo Nix the year before. I mean, him and Bo Nix are boys who's now turned up in the NFL. He said that Dante Moore throws the football in a way that he's never seen before. He said he's a Heisman finalist next year. I'm like, okay.
Jerron got to look at that and said, I'm out.
Yeah, that probably doesn't bode super well for me to play as a true freshman. So more power to JSK or JKS and more power to Dante Moore. And if I'm an Oregon fan, yeah, it hurts to lose a quarterback via a short-term signee, but you got to be fired up about the Dante Moore era going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Oregon fans, talk to us. Where do you think the Ducks dominated the recruiting cycle in 2025? Who are you most happy about, and who do you think plays early? Let us know in the comment section below. JD, we are now talking Ohio State Buckeyes.
Here we
the
go.
Buckeyes finish number 1 in the real rankings, number 5 in the recruiting rankings, and some of these recruiting fans care more about the recruiting rankings than they do the overall rankings. But look at this is a really, really good class. At times they were number 1. I think there was a couple misses. David Sanders Jr., you'd like to have the number 1 offensive tackle in America, but hey, you got Carter Lowe. They went into Texas. They land Riley Pettijohn, and their quarterback Tavian St. Clair committed to them since 2023. So this was a huge class. Yeah, there were some disappointments, but overall, I mean, loaded, especially at key positions. Steve, what do you like about this Ohio State Buckeye recruiting class?
Well, they had the number 1 defense in the country this past season, and they land guys that fit that standard. Devin Sanchez was their top corner in the country. You're talking about guys like Naeem Offord and DJ Pickett. All 3 visited Ohio State at various points in the process. Naeem Offord also at one point committed to Ohio State. But Devin Sanchez was their guy. That's who they poured into. He's a Buckeye. He's got a chance to add to that recent DBU tradition that they've had at Ohio State. And then Riley Pettijohn, maybe the most athletic linebacker in the country, to choose Ohio State over Texas, Texas A&M, and USC. That was one of the Buckeyes' biggest recruiting wins on the trail going into the Lone Star State, landing Sanchez, landing Pettijohn. So love what they did there. And then running back was a huge need for them, Josh. They lose Travion Henderson. They lose Quinshon Judkins. They go out and sign 3 guys. Bo Jackson, the coveted in-state guy who Alabama and Georgia hosted for visits. Then you flip Anthony Rogers from Alabama. He's kind of a gadget, versatile guy that can hurt you in a lot of ways. And then Isaiah West, who at one point was committed to Kentucky, he is as physically ready to go at the running back position as anyone in the country. Hurt as a senior, but I'm talking about just 215 pounds, a guy that looks the part. 3 running backs to help soften the blow of losing Henderson and Judkins, the best running back room in the country.
Chad, when we talk recruiting, a lot of the time, there might be fans tuned in right now that say, well, Ohio State finished number 1. How come recruits didn't hop on board? But in recruiting, we know there's a bit of a lag. So what's the sense you get already from 2026 recruits when they talk about the Buckeyes?
I mean, honestly, Josh, it's the same, maybe a slight, more excitement there because they come off a championship. But look, Ohio State recruits at a high level every year. Now they just got over the top and won that national championship this season. And that's obviously going to help it and boost a little bit maybe in 2026 and 2027 and moving forward. But look, Ohio State has high expectations every year. I mean, they were on the cusp of beating Georgia a couple of years ago and then facing TCU for a national championship. Georgia and Ohio State were the best 2 teams playing in that time, and it was a crazy game, missed field goal. Ohio State was right there then. So I think it doesn't change a lot. They're an elite program. They're viewed that way by the elite recruits every cycle. They're going to recruit at an elite level every cycle and be in that top 3, top 5, if not number 1, each and every year. So yes, the national championship, definitely only helps their chances to sign a bigger and better class this year, but it'll be no different. It'll be elite. We're talking about them again in December. And then again next February, we'll be saying the same things. A top class, loaded players, coast to coast, 5 stars here, number 1 players there. Ohio State is the Ohio State.
Yeah, they are, no doubt about it. But there's been a lot of coaching change.
Yeah.
So
turnover.
When is it about the X's and O's, or is it more about the Jimmies and Joes?
I think it's got to be I don't want to sit on the fence here, but I think it's probably a mesh of both. I think at a place like Ohio State, you're always going to be within the threshold of what you need to win a national championship, whether it's at the quarterback position, from a talent perspective. Right. Yes. And so, did Chip Kelly definitely earn his money a year ago by how he called that offense? Absolutely. I mean, there's some huge spots. But I think the other piece we talk about with recruiting from the high school level, at Ohio State, you probably also can swing a pretty big bat when it comes to recruiting your next OC in DC. So I'm not too worried about Ohio State from an X's and O's perspective. I do want to say this, though, Josh, about Ohio State. Can we finally acknowledge that Ryan Day wasn't born on third base? If he was born on third base, he'd be out by now. Urban Meyer coached his last game in 2018, and they just consistently live in the top 5 when it comes to acquiring talent. So Ryan Day, good coach, good recruiter, and nothing new here.
It doesn't happen overnight. I don't mean to bring this up, but bring up Jim Harbaugh. He did it in year 7? It took him year 8. He did it. Yeah. So for Ryan Day to do it in year 5 or 6, hey, it's tough. It ain't easy. Steve, a phenomenal class. They were able to hold on to a lot of these commitments. I know we made a lot about Naeem Offord at the end, but there were guys on this commit list that other teams were coming after, and they were coming after hard, including some of these names here, but also Tarvis Alford. He's from the South Florida area. Miami was involved with him. But how is Ohio State, minus Naeem Offord, able to hold on to so many of their top commitments down the stretch?
Well, I think their infrastructure and the relationships that they have with recruits allows them to battle till the end and hang on to guys. Look, everybody has their challenges to hang on to all their commits. Everybody has their flips. But Ohio State, from a relationship standpoint, they do a great job. From an NIL standpoint, infrastructure, resources, these kids see an opportunity to really capitalize on NIL at Ohio State. I think that was a real relevant thing down the stretch for Quincy Porter this cycle, the number 2 receiver in the country. He's taking visits at the end of the cycle, Penn State, talking to Florida. I think a lot of that was NIL motivated, just to see how far it could go for him this cycle. And then Ohio State, they're able to flex in that realm and balance it. I think their infrastructure allows them to be successful, have those direct conversations with these kids, give them the answers necessary in a way that they trust and they lock in there. So communication, the way they talk and relate to their recruits and are able to show them on the roster, this is how our current players are taken care of. It resonates with the recruits, and they were able to keep these guys. Look, Tarvos TJ Alford was texting Chad while we were at the table that he was thinking about flipping to Miami. So that thing, went down to the absolute end there, and the Hurricanes were fighting all the way to the finish. They hang on to Tarvos TJ Alford.
All right, Ohio State fans, you talk to us in the comment section. Who do you think is going to be the next impact freshman for the Buckeyes? Jeremiah Smith kind of laid the blueprint for how it's done. Now the expectations of these freshmen are high. Let us know who you like. Comment section below. All right, we're going to talk some Michigan recruiting. But first, JD, let's take a look at these rankings.
Let's do it.
And Michigan's relevant here because they move up from 9 to 6. One of the biggest developments of the day was Ty Haywood coming off the board, a top 50 recruit. The highest rated uncommitted player at any position. I was going to say offensive tackle. He's a position of major need for the Wolverines, but he comes off the board. And here we go. We talked about the top 5 already. We're going to get into more of these teams, but today's a big day for these guys. And we're here at the finish line. We're putting a bow on the class. We're putting a cherry on top. Some of these teams outside the top 10 next year, they're going to want to be inside the top 10 when it's all said and done, but great classes across the board. Signing day is it's kind of like, I know we're in the middle of winter, but it kind of feels like spring.
Yeah, it does sort of feel like a turning of the page, if you will. Especially for you, this is kind of like your finish line for 2025. I know you're on a 2026 already on your channel, but in general, this is like Now this is all put to bed. No more, who is he going to sign? He's not going to sign. There'll be some of that, I'm sure, with the short-term signee stuff just in the world of college football we're living in. But to kind of put a bow on this thing, got to feel good for you, I have to imagine.
It feels great. Always feels great to get to the end of a cycle. You like, it's like a story. You want to get to the end, and even if you're ready for the next chapter or whatever, you want to finish this one. And that's what today's all about, and that's what we're celebrating. That's why you guys are tuned in. We love it. If you guys are still watching, hit that subscribe button for us. We're trying to grow this channel every year, get a little bigger, get a little bit more viewership. So jump on board and hit subscribe. All right.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
End of the period, more or less, for 2025. You walk in the office today, throw the fours up.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, fourth quarter, baby.
Fourth quarter, finish strong.
Let's do this. As you should.
Lapses in judgment.
As you should. Yeah.
Remembered to get dressed. I put my pants on this morning. I'm good to go. All right. Let's talk a little Michigan Wolverine recruiting. They come in at number 6 overall. And boy, was it a fun class. Like we said, they signed Ty Haywood today. So they're one of the only programs in the top 10 with major action on the board today. But the majority of this class is already booked. We're going to get into it. We're going to definitely talk some Bryce Underwood. That November flip was probably the highlight of the class. I mean, he was committed to LSU for over 300 days. Shea Dixon says it perfectly of our Bengal Tiger site. But Steve Wiltfong, let's get in here. Bryce Underwood, when did you start to hear the rumors, and when did you put some legitimacy behind those rumors?
Well, the rumors started in the fall, and it really started picking up for Michigan after another poor showing against Illinois, a tough loss where, look, Michigan, Sharon Moore hires Sean McGee to come in and be his general manager. And I think the Wolverines, as the season continued, really started to change the way that they were going to recruit, the way they were going to attack NIL and be a major player. And then obviously there were some people outside of the program that also greatly impacted Bryce Underwood and his decision to flip, whether that was a local trainer where he worked out, keeping Michigan warm throughout the season, and then some heavy hitters, some billionaires coming in and getting behind it and helping show the type of potential earnings that Bryce Underwood could have if he stayed home and played quarterback at the University of Michigan. Then he went and took like 4 visits to campus. A lot of people are like, he's not going to games. He didn't need to go to games. You can watch the games on TV. He went to watch Michigan practice like 4 times, saw a place where he could be the best version of himself under center, under Sharon Moore. So the money, the NIL, staying close to home, what that means, and then playing for Coach Sharon Moore and company, a chance to be a difference maker and get Michigan back on track. But it was around the Illinois game where Michigan and everybody powwowed and said, look, we got to get serious here. We got to change things, because Michigan, they had the number 10 defense in the country this year. They were phenomenal against the run, number 5, 129 in total offense, 130 in passing offense. If they get just a little more mileage out of the offense, if they rank in the 50s or 60s, they make the college football playoff. Even with that, they beat Ohio State and they beat Alabama to end the season. So getting back on track offensively starts with landing the number 1 player in the country, Bryce Underwood. A lot of forces came together to make that happen, and number 19 will be under center for the Maize and Blue.
Yeah. So, Chad, when we talk about recruiting momentum at the end of the cycle, is that it? Or is Michigan going to take this momentum that they found in 2025 and convert it into success in 2026?
Oh no, it keeps going, Josh. I mean, it's I'm hearing so much now about that quarterback at Michigan wanting to play with a guy like Bryce, from offensive linemen to, of course, skill guys, and just recruits in general. I mean, just the Bryce Underwood signing will have an impact on this 2026 and likely 2027 class in recruiting for the University of Michigan. And so, no, it doesn't stop here. Doesn't stop today with Ty Haywood, announcing for Michigan, signing with the Wolverines and teaming up with a guy like 5-star Andrew Babalola in the trenches there to protect a guy like Bryce Underwood in the future. But no, it definitely carries on. And just to kind of piggyback, off like a Ty Haywood somewhat flip, and then Bryce Underwood flipping from LSU. Man, I love the flips that Michigan, had in this class. Obviously, Bryce speaks for itself. But a guy like Jordan Young, a center fielder at safety, flipped from Clemson, late to Michigan, an elite corner that Georgia worked extremely hard to keep in this class. Shamari Earls from Virginia, a 6'2 plus corner that Georgia had extremely high on their board. They had Kirby Smart involved, Travaris Robinson, Dante Williams trying to hold on to that one as well. And then Nate Marshall, 6'4", 250 plus, had a great All-American Bowl out in San Antonio, flipping him from Auburn in this class. So, look, Auburn didn't just flip Bryce Underwood's other big flips in this class to build this class into a top 5, top 10 class this recruiting, and they will continue this momentum in 2026.
Steve, you want to chime in here?
I just think the root of it is they are not going to lose on the NIL front anymore. They're going in with a loaded gun when they go into these blue chip battles. Now, Bryce Underwood almost doesn't count. That was a whole nother level of recruitment there. But a Nate Marshall, flipping him from Auburn down the stretch, getting Ty Haywood in the fold here at the end of the cycle. When you flip Shamari Earls and Jordan Young, these are the type of recruitments that we haven't seen Michigan win. Now obviously they win a national championship under Coach Jim Harbaugh. That was a lot of old school recruiting, player development, outstanding strength and conditioning program. But these are guys that were committed to powerhouse programs that Michigan at the buzzer were able to flip. Sharon Moore is a head coach that is involved with the relationship component as much as just about any coach in the country, but they're giving him a full deck and his staff a full deck to go out on the trail and battle for the guys that they covet. Nate Marshall, as pivotal a recruiting win as there is this cycle, and some of these guys they flipped in the secondary, Jordan Young, Shamari Earls, Elijah Dotson from Pitt to go along with Kainoa Winston, who's a Penn State legacy. His brother's one of the best players in the Big Ten in the Nittany Lions secondary. These guys allow Michigan to continue to play the style of defense we're accustomed to seeing them at Michigan under Wink Martindale and company. A top 10 defense isn't going anywhere. Then you go out and get Bryce Underwood. You figure your offense is going to be able to get some first downs, and Michigan will be back in college football playoff contention before we know it.
All right. I want to, JD, you talk a lot of Michigan football on the hard count on the On3 channel. Are you penciling Bryce Underwood in as the starter for 2025?
I am. And I mean, I guess you can't put it in pen just yet. So I guess pencil's a good way to say it. But if you don't play Bryce Underwood game one, that is because there is something woefully wrong with him acclimating to the college game, which I don't see happening with him being the top player in America. And he just changes the entire ceiling of what Michigan can be. This is not to knock anyone in that quarterback room, but we've all seen what Bryce Underwood's capable of, and the offense they're going to run in 2025 under Chip Lindsey going to be the power spread. So essentially all that means is they're trying to maximize who they have at quarterback, give him decisions to make, and allow him to impact the game to the nth degree. If you don't have a guy like Bryce Underwood playing quarterback, you handcuff what that offense is in my mind.
So you don't handcuff. Are you just throwing him in and going full offense day one?
I think you should. And I think that's a big reason why they brought in Chip Lindsey. And that was something we were talking about a lot throughout this entire recruitment is, okay, if you land Bryce Underwood, that's awesome. You don't put him out there in the I formation and run 34 whams 40 times a game. You're letting that guy cook a little bit and be special. And so to hire a Chip Lindsey to cater to his skill set, to me, those seem married together, and I think he's your guy from game one. I truly do.
All right, Michigan fans, I want to know just how you guys were feeling in even September into October. It seemed like there was apathy. When we'd put out a Michigan recruiting video, it just seemed like there wasn't – it's not that there was negativity around it. It was just that there wasn't much hope. You know what I mean? When we talked Michigan top targets, compared to how things changed – less than a month later, mid to late November, the flip happens. Michigan fans, talk to me. Can you guys believe what the Wolverines have accomplished this cycle? Let me know. Comment section below. All right. We're going to get out of order here a little bit. I want to talk the Florida Gators. I think it's a good transition when we talk Florida from Michigan to Florida because I feel like their trajectory in the 2025 class was very much the same. We saw the Florida Gators sit from the 40s to the 30s in the rankings to come and finish at number 11 in JD. It all happened when Florida's AD, Scott Strickland, gave a vote of confidence to Billy Napier, the head football coach at Florida, seemed like he might be let go at the end of the year, but I think it was week 7, week 8, somewhere along those lines. It wasn't popular amongst fans, but boy, did it change not only the recruiting trajectory, but of the season. What do you think happened with the Florida Gators with that announcement?
I think just the overall, you mentioned the vote of confidence. Think about the confidence that brought to your locker room. You're hearing everybody from us on our show to other folks with microphones on national platforms talking about not just is Billy Napier fired. We're having the conversation already. Hey, who will be the next guy? Is it Lane Kiffin? Is it Eli Drinkwitz? Did they take a big swing and grab someone from the NFL? Right? Like that was the discussion we were all having. And so as much as you say you put the blinders on in the locker room and, we keep the main thing, everybody's on their phone. Everybody's got Twitter. Like, I can't imagine the impact that would have on a kid's psyche trying to juggle class, get ready for a game, all those things. So to know you got your guy for the rest of the season and going forward, I have to believe that just sort of stabilized things. Then also DJ Lagway getting the keys to the car made a pretty big impact as well.
I think it was both. Steve, we covered a lot of this with the Gators and their turnaround on the recruiting trail. It feels a lot like Michigan in the sense that I don't think it was just a one-off. I don't think the Florida Gators just had a couple good months at the end of the recruiting cycle. Are you getting the sense that this momentum that the Gators carried through the 2025 signing day is going to go into 2026?
Well, I think anyone that knows Billy Napier knows what type of person he is and how authentic he is. And with that, it resonates with anyone that comes around him. So recruits love him. Families love him. He hires a staff that's pretty like-minded to him. Talking to people in that Florida building in the summer, Florida had some of the best players in the country on campus, but they weren't even finishing the runner-up. They were finishing third, fourth, and fifth. But people were saying, wait till we play. We're going to have a good season, and these guys, we're going to come back around on them and land them later. Now, the season didn't go the way they wanted out the gate. People were firing them after the Miami game, but you see how hard the kids played for Billy Napier and company? That culture's real because of the corner office setting the tone and then how everybody goes about their business. So Florida hangs in there. They battle. They play hard week to week. The administration stands behind Florida. Well, the recruits instantly are like, well, I can help Coach Napier get this thing back on track. I know he's going to be there next year. I love him so much. I want to come ball for him. So that's how they're able to go out there and flip a Tramel Jones from Florida State, how they're able to go out there and ultimately land in Dallas Wilson, how you're able to hold off of Miami for Ben Hanks III. Ben Hanks III finishes as a 5-star cornerback in the On3 rankings. He's the best defensive back to go to Florida since Joe Hayden. 13 interceptions this past year. I think he's one of the special players coming into the SEC. I loved him at the Navy All-America Bowl. He's so smooth. 13 interceptions. How in the hell do you play against Ben Hanks and allow him to get 13 interceptions? Just ignore him. If the ball comes over there, he's going to make the play on it. Again, best defensive back to come to Florida, in my opinion, since Joe Hayden. Mark it down. I love what they did at receiver this cycle, but Ben Hanks is what excites me most about this Florida Gators class.
Yeah, Chad, I want to talk to you about some of these wide receivers, whether it's Vernell Brown III, Dallas Wilson. Also, he's not on this list, but Joshua Moore is another one. All three of these guys have potential to come in and play right away with DJ Lagway.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of their strong suits. They obviously lost Joshua Moore to Miami, late in the process. That one kind of went back and forth late.
Oh,
but
that's right.
Yeah, they got Vernell Brown III, though, Dallas Wilson, Nashawn Montgomery. All three will be just fine at the University of Florida under Billy Gonzalez and that staff there for sure. I mean, Vernell Brown, he's obviously a Florida legacy, has multiple connections to that program. I've always kind of told him, just in a joking way, that I think his blood is orange, not red. That I think he was made to play in the swamp. He was made to be a face of the University of Florida program. And he has the skill to go with that charisma, that personality, that confidence. And, what he brings to the table is just excitement at that receiver position, leadership at that receiver position. Then you have Dallas Wilson. They flipped from Oregon. That was a crazy, obviously, signing day and a few days after with that one, how that played out. But he's an elite playmaker, 6'3", big catch radius, has that kind of that almost looks like he's playing in slow motion, makes things look so easy. Great jump ball guy, full of personality. A guy like Nashawn Montgomery, every time he plays, he makes plays. Maybe doesn't get all the hype as Vernell or Dallas, but a very good addition to that room. And for me, the biggest thing about this Florida class is it seemed like that last month or so, it was full on go flip season. I mean, those guys were flipping guys left and right, from Joseph Mbachu from Texas, one going down the list, Jaden Woods, Penn State, Ty Jackson from USC, Tavares Dice from Auburn, Tramel Jones from Florida State, Steven Shivers from Georgia, Dallas Wilson, Oregon, Laganza Haywood, Tennessee, Hilton Stubbs, Florida State. It was ongoing. They capped off yesterday with Onis Konanbany, flipping him from Tennessee.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the whole writing on the wall for this class was flip season for the University of Florida. Once they kind of picked things up, like Steve said, midseason wins over LSU, Ole Miss, back in Florida State, they really picked up some momentum and closed extremely strong in this class.
JD, UF Twitter has been buzzing over the early line of 6.5 wins for the Florida Gators. Seems like me and the boys are smashing the over on 6.5 wins just based on what I know in recruiting and what I saw from DJ Lagway playing on one leg toward the end of the season last year. What do you think about that 6.5?
I'm glad you said it that way, him playing on one leg. So I, Josh, have been very fortunate to now be a new father. My little girl is about 3 months old. Whether or not she is able to afford college will depend on Florida hitting the over for 6.5. That's how confident I am. Okay. DJ Lagway has only started 7 games. He's 6-1 as a starter. The one game that he didn't actually, or the game he lost, is the one he didn't even finish against Georgia. And again, he wasn't even full strength. So I understand the schedule is brutal, but when you look at what they have ahead of them, you get Texas in the swamp. You go to Kyle Field, and that'll be a tough one. But like Georgia, they're going to have a new quarterback. No guarantee what they are. No guarantee what Ole Miss is. They'll have a new quarterback. So there's a lot, I think, that is up in the air about their schedule in terms of you don't know who a lot of these teams are even going to be when you play them in November. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about DJ Lagway, let's say, and I will obviously be taking the over on 6.5 win total. Go ahead and lock that in.
Your daughter told you to smash it?
That's what she said. She said, Dad, I'd be disappointed in you if you don't take it. 3 months old. That was her first sentence. So, yeah. I mean, felt like a sign.
Yeah. She got to see some of what DJ Lagway did.
She caught the tail end of it. Yeah. She was impressed.
Right.
She couldn't go to sleep without DJ Lagway highlights.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Gator fans, you guys got to be feeling good. I mean, what a cycle it was. Vernell Brown, Dallas Wilson, Ben Hanks. To think that this class was ranked in the 30s in late October. Now they sit outside the top 10, just at 11. Unbelievable class. Laganza Shady Hayward, he was a flip. I mean, this was a really impressive run by the Florida Gators, and I don't think it's going to stop until 2026. All right, Steve, what do you got on the Gators?
Yeah, Jaden Woods is a guy that we need to talk about a little bit before we move on to the next program. At one point committed to Penn State. He's the type of guy that we see the Nittany Lions develop into a first rounder. He was a top of the board player for Florida the entire cycle. They had him on campus in the summer. But again, the doubt around Billy Napier and the program coming into the season, he commits to Penn State, who's on solid footing. Florida gets that vote of confidence. The LSU game, the big win over LSU, people inside the swamp said they never felt the stadium like that before, how everyone rallied around the Gators after the loss of Texas, but Lagway's back in the lineup, the vote of confidence for Napier. They beat LSU. It changes everything. Changed things for Jaden Woods, who has a chance to be one of the best pass rushers in the SEC, a 3-sport freak, a state champion in the shot put and discus, a wrestler, and a guy that is going to be a high-motored player, someone that we've seen James Franklin and company turn into the best pass rushers in college football. He's now going to Florida. We'll see if he ultimately becomes that in Gainesville.
All right, yeah, Gator fans, talk to me. Did you guys expect the run that the Gators made, or did that catch you off guard? Because I know a lot of Gator fans did not necessarily agree with the support behind Billy Napier, but the players did. More importantly, recruits did. Did you guys? Let us know, comment section below. And also, if you guys are still watching, smash that subscribe button for us. We're growing this channel, and we need you sickos to be a part of it. All right, let's take a little break from running down the teams, and we're going to talk Notre Dame. here in a second, but I want to talk about some of the flips and decommitments that shaped this 2025 class. I mean, this is what we're here for, right? This is the drama. This is the messiness. This is why we love recruiting. This is the roller coaster ride. And of course, we got some big ones. So we talk Bryce Underwood flipping that commitment from LSU to Michigan, a seismic shift in how this class looked. I mean, from LSU signing or had committed, they had 3 number 1 players at their position. Harlan Berry at running back. They had DeCorian Moore at wide receiver and Bryce Underwood. They end up signing Harlan Berry, a very good get, but Bryce Underwood and DeCorian Moore both go elsewhere. Just shaking up all the things in 2025. Keelan Russell, DeCorian Moore, you see there, Isaiah Gibson, Naeem Offord, Hussein Longstreet. Steve, let's talk about that Longstreet recruitment, because you were kind of right in the middle of it with the Julian Lewis news going down, Longstreet flipping. How was Lincoln Riley able to secure the number 1 player in California and pull him from Texas A&M?
In a nutshell, because he's Lincoln Riley. He's developed several Heisman Trophy winners, several first-round draft picks, number 1 overall picks in the draft. But this was a tricky situation. Hussein Longstreet's older brother, a preferred walk-on at Texas A&M. Hussein committed to Texas A&M for a long time, chose the Aggies over Auburn and several others. USC wasn't in the mix early because Julian Lewis was their top target at the position. Lincoln Riley goes all in on a quarterback or 2 each cycle. Julian Lewis was the guy that they marked early, even before he reclassified. They knew he was going to reclassify. So when Bryce Underwood and his camp were like, hey, I want to come visit USC, they were like, no, we're recruiting Julian Lewis. Julian Lewis reclassifies. He's committed to USC, but he continues to keep other schools warm. He continues to take other visits. Lincoln Riley and USC patient with that for a long time, but they continue to see the development of Hussein Longstreet. He's local. They tried to get in on Hussein Longstreet in the summer. He said, no, thank you. I'm good with Texas A&M. Again, there were some other things and factors in play with A&M and his brother already being there. USC is able to revisit it in the fall. Look, Julian Lewis visits USC as well, but that didn't start. They didn't know. So they're like, look, we got to get a guy. We didn't sign a quarterback in the cycle before. USC's need at quarterback was bigger than any program's need at any position in the land. And so they had to get a guy. They want to get a championship level difference maker. They never stopped recruiting Hussein Longstreet. They went and saw him at his school. Similar to Michigan bringing Bryce Underwood in for some private meetings with the staff to watch practice. USC did the same. And as we got towards the end of the season, 2 weeks to go or whatever, Hussein Longstreet visits for USC's win over Nebraska. His brother's pretty much clear at A&M, only 1 game to go or whatever, I think at that time. He flips from the Aggies to USC, and then Lincoln Riley calls Julian Lewis, tells him they're going in another direction at quarterback. Julian Lewis quickly announces a decommitment, and then a week later, he's in the fold for Colorado. But obviously, Julian Lewis, he was strongly considering Colorado all year, visited them 4 times. Auburn was in the mix for Julian Lewis a couple different times of his process. Georgia, Alabama were some others. Certainly Indiana, he visited a few times. So Julian was always at least 1 foot out the door for USC. And for the Trojans, even though they were hanging in there, they loved Julian Lewis. They could not go without Hussein Longstreet's in the fold for them, 5-star recruit, a local guy that can come in and learn behind Maeva, and then obviously ultimately take it over. And USC's quarterback room all of a sudden looking pretty good. Came into the season with some question marks. Miller Moss, you get Jaden out of the portal. Now you got Jaden coming back as a starter at a good end of the season. Hussein Longstreet's a really talented guy. And Lincoln Riley starting to get that quarterback room in order. The Trojans are coming, man. There's a lot of excitement and optimism around that program. I'm fired up about USC's trajectory, and a lot of that has to do with them landing Hussein Longstreet.
Steve, for a bonus point, can you, and I might be putting you on the spot here, but can you explain the ripple effect, the QB dominoes from the Hussein Longstreet? Can you play that out for us?
Well, it's kind of attached to Bryce Underwood because
Sure.
Bryce Underwood, Michigan, Brady Hart was a reclassified behind the scenes too, right? He does not stick with his commitment to Michigan because Bryce Underwood is coming to Michigan. So then you have LSU and Texas A&M pivoting to Brady Hart, LSU losing out on Underwood, A&M losing out on Hassan Longstreet. Hassan Longstreet committing to USC makes Julian Lewis officially not a Trojan. I don't think we thought he was going to stick at that point anyway, but he quickly commits to Colorado. So those are the dominoes that were instantly impacted there by those two young men.
Little game of connect the dots there for you.
That was impressive to do the recall there to sort out all the puzzle pieces.
And he
that was
even took
big
it
time
back
by
a
Steve.
step further to tie it in with the Bryce Underwood. So it's kind of like the higher the domino, the more ripple effect it's going to have.
Sure.
Like so when we saw these top QBs start bouncing around, it really shook some stuff up. Speaking of shaking stuff up, I want to talk to Chad about DeCorian Moore. This was a wild recruitment as well. He was committed to LSU, as I said. DeCorian Moore made 2 commitments, and neither of them were to the in-state Texas Longhorns. Chad, take us behind the scenes of DeCorian Moore's recruitment and ultimate decision to flip to the Ducks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Texas was always thought to be, when he committed to LSU so early in the process, Texas was viewed as, maybe the number one competition for LSU, but nobody ever thought that Oregon was that far behind, if not right there with Texas competing with LSU. And of course, Ohio State was very much in the mix as well. But he continued the dialogue with, Will Stein, Dan Lanning, Junior Adams, those guys in Eugene, continued to take some trips out there to the Pacific Northwest, to the University of Oregon. Obviously, the player development there under Junior Adams, the offense, obviously the brand, the Nike, the entire program, the NIL, all of that factored in. And I think he surprised some people, obviously kind of quickly announcing a signing day, doing his thing on Instagram and answering questions and making that announcement for Oregon. And we still always felt that Texas was right there. And they quickly, I would say faded to an extent. They never truly gave up, but Oregon did a great job of just keeping that connection, keeping him, and his mom was very much involved in his recruitment. The dialogue there with her, she trusts the coaching staff and getting them to Oregon multiple times. In the end, they checked the boxes for DeCorian Moore, who I think is the most exciting player in this class.
Yeah, definitely an impact player. JD, when the average college football fan watches a football game, do you think they realize how much has gone on behind the scenes to assemble a roster?
I think the sickos do, and I think it's becoming more and more of a year-round affair where if you're a college football fan, you get your fix in the month of March, as you said, you can the same in the month of August. But yeah, some of the stories behind these things, like the actual inner workings to land a Bryce Underwood, to flip a DeCorian Moore, all those things, I don't even think I have the total gauge for all of the madness that applies there.
All right, let's go. Let's get back on track and knock out some more teams. I want to talk Notre Dame recruiting. Another one of these teams, and their success on the field correlated to a great run at the end. Notre Dame finishes at number 12. Another one of these programs that we said was kind of sitting around number 20, number 22, 25 for much of the cycle. And at the end, they really made a good push. Steve, let's bring you in. What do you like so much about this Notre Dame class?
Well, first and foremost, it's arguably one of the best secondary classes in the country. For Notre Dame to go out there and land Jadon Blair, Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary IV, who is one of my favorite players in the class, top player in the Hoosier State, also a phenomenal basketball player. We talked about Ben Hanks and his ability to pick off the passer. Mark Zachary, I think he had like 8 or 9 interceptions as a senior, maybe even more than that. Just a phenomenal two-way player with elite ball skills. Notre Dame, their calling card this year is what they were able to do defensively in all 3 levels, but a secondary that loves to play man and be versatile. These guys bring that ability and maintain that standard and style of play for Notre Dame. But Christopher Burgess and Madden Faramo are also difference makers, D-line and linebacker, 2 of their most coveted players in the country. And then another standard Notre Dame class, one of the top 5 offensive line classes in the country, led by On3's number 1 ranked offensive tackle, Will Black. So standard Notre Dame class, built on defense, really good offensive line for the Irish this cycle, and one that should keep them in the discussion for the college football playoff for years to come.
Yeah, and I think keeping him in the discussion is Marcus Freeman staying at Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I mean, the locker room was fired up for him to get the job. Does that kind of also inject some electricity into the program?
It definitely has to, but then you look at what he's done since that moment where they announce he's getting the job and he tells the team, like, that moment is awesome, but then you do have to coach, go win some games. And there's been some unfortunate moments too, like the loss to Marshall, loss to NIU this year. But overall, I mean, 33-10. I have a college football playoff run all the way up to the national championship where you give Ohio State a game in the fourth quarter. Like, what he's done in his short amount of time as a head coach, he's only done it for 3 years. Like, he's still figuring this thing out, how to be a head coach. And I truly expect, based on this year, Notre Dame now with the optics around what you can accomplish there on the football field, I think they breathe the new oxygen. And I'd be very excited to see where they are this time next year in the recruiting rankings.
He's built for it. He's built for it. You see him. You see some of those trials and tribulations as a head coach, the loss to Stanford at home at night, the loss to Marshall, the loss to Northern Illinois, and people saying Brian Kelly would have never lost those games, but having the resolve and the fortitude to get your team back on track, pick themselves up off the mat. We followed college football for a long time. We've seen head coaches melt. We've seen head coaches point the finger, start getting blame, which really rocks your culture, messes everything up. They just kept plowing through. He's learning on the fly as a head football coach, and Notre Dame goes into the national title game with the nation's longest winning streak because Marcus Freeman and the confidence he continues to instill in that program, even during some tough losses when he was learning to lead a program on the fly. Now we think he's ready to hit his stride and have Notre Dame in these type of ball games year in and year out.
And Josh, we talked to some guys at the national championship game, talked to some folks on Notre Dame staff, and they were telling us in recruiting, it's never been a Marcus Freeman issue. It's always been a, well, if I go to Notre Dame, am I going to be able to accomplish the same things as a Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera. I think that win over Georgia in the college football playoff optically has got to do a lot in the southeastern part of the United States. How many times have we seen Notre Dame start hot in the summer and have, these commitments that, sort of fade when the weather gets a little bit colder from the southeast. And, they think about, man, I want to spend winter in South Bend. I don't know if that's what it is, but you have to think a win over Georgia only helps things.
It feels like that. Chad, you cover the South a lot. What's the buzz amongst Notre Dame recruits? Do you get a sense that there is a heightened level of awareness of where the Irish kind of stand right now?
Yeah, to piggyback off what JD said, no doubt kids down here where I live in the South took notice that Notre Dame beat Georgia, in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. So and Notre Dame recruits obviously a special type of brand, student athlete, and they recruit across the country. They pull the Atlanta area, that they want to go into Florida, like a Dallas Golden into Tampa and pull him. So they pick their area to recruit the right kid that fits their culture. But there's no doubt that win over Georgia definitely was seen throughout the Southeast.
All right, Notre Dame fans, chime in, talk to us. How do you guys feel about your 2025 class? And more importantly, how do you feel about the future of Notre Dame recruiting? Talk to us in the comment section below. All right, we are going to move to the Miami Hurricanes. I want to talk about the Canes. The Canes are, they really had a great finish. They have a great class. When we look at this list, I want to bring in Chad. Chad, you do a lot of you cover the Canes a lot. You get down in Florida a lot. They also have a presence in Georgia with quarterback Luke Nickel. What did you see from Luke Nickel during his senior season?
Well, I basically went out with his last game of his high school career. I basically saw perfection. I think he was 21 of 22 in the state championship game for like 430 plus yards. 4 touchdowns, and his back-to-back state championship season. So what I saw in Luke Nickel was basically perfection there at the end. And I said this for the last probably 2.5 years. And look, I know some stuff. Before he committed to Miami, he tried to commit to another ACC school who told him, no, let's wait. Let's work out in the summer. Let's go. They're probably kicking themselves right about now for what Luke has become, because he wasn't this kid 2 years ago. but he's grown into that starting role. They started off a little bit shaky early in his junior season, went on a great run to beat Walton and upset Walton to win a state championship as a junior. And then he has weapons galore with C.J. Wiley, Ethan Barbour, Ryan G., and they go on a great run this year as a senior to close out that almost perfect moment of 21 on 22, 400 yards in the state championship game. But he's a leader. He's about business. He wants to work. He wants to win. And he'll do whatever it takes to make guys around him better. Guys want to play for him. Guys want to play with him. He comes from one of the top high school programs in the country at Milton High School in Alpharetta, Georgia. Those guys work. Those guys win. Those guys compete. He will be ready to compete early at the University of Miami. And they got no doubt about that.
Steve, one of the signatures of Miami Hurricane recruiting under Mario Cristobal are late flips. And maybe we didn't see the magnitude that we have in the first couple of years of Mario's tenure at Miami, but we saw a big one down the stretch. Let's talk about edge Hayden Lowe. How is Miami able to flip him from USC?
Relentless consistency with this recruitment. And yes, they flipped him from USC. They also beat Oregon for Hayden Lowe. There was a time where it looked like he was going to flip from USC to Oregon, but Miami, Mario Cristobal, Coach Jason Taylor, NFL Hall of Famer, the way he builds relationships with recruits see the opportunity. Time greats. Those are some of the reasons that led Hayden Lowe to Miami.
The addition and, some major subtractions.
Sure.
You're losing Restrepo, you're losing Cam Ward, but you're also bringing in a bunch of talent. Where do you have Miami right now in your ACC power rankings?
Got him at 2, Josh. And obviously you lose a Cam Ward, and what he was last year was probably worth, maybe 3 wins with what that defense didn't have.
If you looked at Mario, he was pointing at you when he in that photo. He had the number 1 up. He thinks he should be number 1 in your power rankings.
And they're going to have a chance to prove it, without a doubt. I mean, I think what's noteworthy about Miami, even with them being at 2, for the record, I have Clemson at 1 as we sit here right now, know more about their quarterback play and more about some of their weapons. But talking about Miami, they've had an upward trend every single year under Mario Cristobal in Coral Gables. They won 7 games the year before, and they just won 10 games recently. So, I mean, they continue to just take steps up the ladder, and I'm curious to see at what point that starts to really move them on the recruiting trail here in future cycles. But when it comes to next season, if Carson Beck hits the way I think they expect him to hit in that Shannon Dawson offense, going to be good vibes in Coral Gables.
Yeah, and they're bringing in some playmakers. We've seen Joshua Moore, who flipped his commitment from the Florida Gators to the Miami Hurricanes. Chad, you've seen Joshua Moore a lot. Is he the type of wideout that you think could come in and play right away at Miami?
Oh, there's no doubt. He's big, he's long, he's fast. He has that South Florida confidence about him. Look, I like the group that they got. Obviously, they flipped a guy like Joshua Moore, back from Florida to Miami. He's a guy that can be an instant I think playmaker for the University of Miami. He's a hometown kid from South Florida. He knows that staff. He loves Kevin Beard. He loves Mario Cristobal, where the program is going, but also getting a guy like Malachi Tony back, who Malachi, was a guy that was committed. He went and visited Alabama, backed off that commitment, then reclassifies from 26 to 25. People thinking maybe Alabama's a school. Kentucky had an OV set with Kentucky. Never made that trip, goes back to Miami. He plays with Diabell there at American Heritage and Plantation, a top program down in South Florida. Getting him back, one of those more joystick, slot guys, return man, jet sweep kids, super full of excitement. Dalen Upshaw from Alabama, who Auburn recruited and other schools were involved with as well, Florida State, to get him out of Alabama, plays for Central High School under Patrick Nix, Bo Nix's father, a great program, multi-time state champion. So a good overall group with Joshua Moore leading the way.
All right, Miami fans, you got to be pleased about this class. Mario Cristobal knocks another one out of the park. Chime in with us. Who do you think are the impact freshmen in this 2025 class? Let us know. All right, JD, let's do it. It's time to talk Colorado Buffaloes recruiting. And Coach Prime was on the trail. They finished number 32, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because some of these guys, despite a number 32 ranked class, these guys are going to be on the field as true freshmen. Why do you think the Coach Prime can find so much success with not only highly rated guys like a Julian Lewis, but it doesn't matter if you're recruited from the high school level, whatever your ranking is, you're expected to come in and play.
Yeah, I think when he took over Colorado, just the situation that it was, like, it's been well documented, one win before he got there. And then this past year where they go win 9 football games and have a chance to go control their destiny for the Big 12 in the month of November. So what's interesting about this class to me, Josh, is they're up 30 spots from the year before, and they're second in the Big 12 right now. Yeah. And if you win your conference, you punch your ticket to the college football playoff as the format stands right now. So talking about Colorado going forward, like landing a Julian Lewis, your quarterback of the future, is massive. And I do think we talk so much about the brand that Deion Sanders is. That matters in modern college football when it comes to recruiting. You want to go play for a guy that's been there and done that, and in himself is going to help you get exposure at the highest level, and your games are going to matter.
Yeah. And they had some big wins on the trail. Don't get me wrong. There is no doubt about it. Just because they didn't sign a huge class in terms of numbers, they still had some really great signees in this class. And we got to start with Julian Lewis. I don't know whether to go to Chad or Steve on this, but I'm going to go to Chad because Juju Lewis played at Carrollton, Georgia. Chad's home base is in Georgia. He's seen him develop from an 8th grader. Chad, what makes Julian Lewis so special?
I just think football IQ, man. He's smart. I think he was groomed for this. He was kind of made for this. I mean, he had a lot of hype coming out of like 7th grade, 8th grade, a lot like what I heard with Trevor Lawrence coming out of Ackworth. Julian was coming out of the Atlanta area and goes over to Carrollton. And I heard the same stuff about Julian in that 7th, 8th grade from the same kind of people in this area that I did about Trevor Lawrence at that same stage in his life. So I think, he was groomed to have the spotlight on him. He was groomed to play quarterback. He knows what the position is about. He knows what responsibility the quarterback has from a leadership standpoint, to putting the team on the back when it's needed, to making plays. And not only did he have the skill set and the talent, but he played at one of the best high school programs in the state for one of the best high school coaches, I feel like, in the country, in Joey Keane, to be prepared for college, to be prepared to reclassify and basically skip your junior season of high school and go play college ball a year early. To me, what makes Julian good is the intangibles. Yes, he can throw the ball. Yes, he has good accuracy. Yes, he can read his progressions, but the little things off the field, the homework, the film room, the putting in the extra time, to me, that's what can kind of make him successful at the University of Colorado.
Yeah, Steve, I kind of stole your line there because every time you were on the Inside Scoop or the Wilt Fong Whip Around, we talked Colorado, you would mention that these guys are expected to play as freshmen. So when we look at the elite skill talent that Coach Sanders is bringing in, who do you think we're going to see on the field making plays for the Buffs next season?
Well, receiver was obviously a point of emphasis for Coach Sanders and his staff this cycle. And one name that I always made sure we included when we were talking about Julian Lewis and Carde Smith and London Merritt and Nathaniel Usu-Boateng, guys that were ranked high that Colorado was recruiting. He wasn't ranked high at the time, but he was high on Colorado's board and ultimately finished in the on 300 with a fantastic senior season and great showing at the Under Armour game is Quentin Gibson. He is lightning in a bottle. He is a touchdown waiting to happen out of North Crowley, Texas, the Max Preps National High School Football Player of the Year. He had over 2,000 yards receiving and 36 touchdowns, playing against some of the best high school competition in the country. Then he went down to the Under Armour game, and in practice when I was there, he was an impossible cover, creates easy separation, an uber confident guy. Colorado, Oklahoma State, TCU, SMU, some of the programs that just have exciting offenses. You don't really follow their recruitment, and then you turn on Saturdays and you see them just scoring a lot of points because they landed guys like Quentin Gibson. Colorado loved him. He was a top of the board guy. To get him to go with the more well-known guys like Adrian Wilson and Quanell Farrakhan, who had great senior years themselves. These guys are all around 20 yards a catch or more. Colorado, you lose a Travis Hunter, you lose some of those dynamic guys. They were one of the most efficient passing offenses in the country this past year because of Shedeur Sanders, but also because of the guys they had on the perimeter. These guys meet that standard, those expectations. They flipped Adrian Wilson from Arizona State. Quanell Farrakhan was a guy that they coveted. And then to go out and get Quentin Gibson at the end, he is going to be an instant difference maker in the Big 12.
Yeah, and flipping Carday Smith also from USC. JD, Colorado started 2 freshmen on their offensive line. Played great. They're going to be sophomore next year. I very much think Carday Smith could come in and start as a freshman. You're starting to see, though, they're developing, right? It's not all about coming in and you got freshmen at every position now. What do you think of the move? Because we just talked about, you're going to pencil in Bryce Underwood as Michigan's quarterback, but what do you think about the move to bring in Caden Salter to kind of bridge the transition from Shedeur to Juju?
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes a ton of sense. And I'm maybe in the minority here because you see a high-profile quarterback get signed and you're excited about what he could be. And it's like, hey, could he help us next year? And Julian Lewis absolutely could do that. Yeah. My standard take on that typically with a talented kid and when you have someone experienced like a Caden Salter in the building is like, hey, let's let our freshman quarterback like sit a year and figure out college, let alone college football. And I think there is such a thing, quite frankly, as playing too early and getting your confidence bruised and developing bad habits and all those things. So I'm not saying that would happen with Julian Lewis, but ultimately I love the idea of bringing in a guy like a Caden Salter, and I think having just some insurance at the quarterback position to tell Julian Lewis, hey, if you win the job, awesome, but if you don't, it's not all on you this year. Have a chance to grow, a chance to figure it out. I love it.
Steve.
Well, you look at the NFL draft year in and year out, a lot of the quarterbacks that get drafted in the first round weren't asked to play as a true freshman. And then you look at like a situation where Dante Moore was committed to Oregon for a long time, flips to UCLA at the buzzer, ends up transferring to Oregon. I think if you ask people around the Oregon building, hey, it would have been great for Dante Moore to watch a Bo Nix prepare, see what it takes to play that position at a high level. And I know Bo Nix is a unique preparer for the football game with just his intangibles and skill set. But for Julian Lewis to get in there and watch how Caden Salter prepares himself. Caden Salter is someone that had been humbled by the sport, but then picked himself up off the mat, goes to Liberty, takes Liberty to a New Year's Six Bowl and wins. Now coming to Colorado, a guy that's been through the grind of college football, it gives Julian Lewis an opportunity to come in and learn how to prepare for college football and do the little things off the field. And that doesn't mean that Julian Lewis doesn't have those traits as Chad talked about. He's someone that on the biggest stage of high school football came in with the microscope and no moment was too big for him. I think if you're Deion Sanders and company, you're always going to bring a veteran in through the transfer portal, no matter what quarterback you landed in the cycle, to help transition from Shedeur to the next guy, and that is Julian Lewis.
All right, Colorado fans, who do you think out of this group is the next star freshman at Colorado? Let us know in the comments section below. Also, you guys, smash that like button. We are live. We want other people to see it. We have almost 1,000 people in here right now, but under 200 likes. So go ahead and like this video. Let's get it out there. All right, JD, let's talk some LSU recruiting.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the Tigers. And I know they lost Bryce Underwood, but we don't have to focus on that. We can focus on what they did land. And they landed a top 10 class in there at number 9 with cornerback DJ Pickett, one of the biggest surprises, Harlem Berry, Carries Kern. I think he's an offensive lineman that can get in there and play early. They flipped Solomon Thomas from Florida State late. Really good class. Chad, what do you love about what LSU did in 2025?
Probably the guys in the trenches, man. I think, SEC football is made with big bodies, and we talked about Texas doing a great job up front, and how they're when we know Alabama's mold and Georgia's mold of success, offensive and defensive linemen. I mean, I like, obviously getting the late flip from Solomon Thomas, from Florida State. Once Alex Atkins left, he really opened things back up, took Florida, get them a strong look as well. And then LSU got him, Courier's Kern. But I think for me, it goes in the trenches on both sides of the football. And to me, that's what Brian Kelly is trying to build, that foundation with a guy like Bo Davis, that coach from the defensive side, and pulling those big bodies in to compete with the schools like Texas, like Bama, like Georgia, where you win. typically in the SEC, especially late in the season in the playoffs, for those big bodies who can control the second half, who can control the clock, and who can make those fourth and shorts or third and shorts when the plays are needed. And to me, that's where this class stands out to me. Of course, you got the skill guys, Harlem Berry, elite running back, DJ Pickett, no doubt about that. But the trenches stands out to me.
All right, Steve, I want to talk to you about the biggest surprises, and it'd be easy to talk Bryce Underwood or DeCorian Moore, but today's Wednesday, and we always keep it positive on Wednesdays.
Positive Wednesdays, yep.
So today we're going to keep it positive. One of the biggest surprises was DJ Pickett. Not only the original commitment in the summer when he did it right here on the On3 Recruits channel, but the fact that LSU was able to hold on to him when it felt like the sky was falling. And you know what I mean? After that Bryce Underwood decommitment, there was some concern in LSU Nation. But Steve, how were they able to hold on to DJ Pickett?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with the relationship with Corey Raymond and the track record of success, his connection to Patrick Peterson, the family's connection to LSU great Patrick Peterson, the comfort level in Baton Rouge. DJ Pickett always felt at home at LSU. And then I think that the Tigers, Austin Thomas and that recruiting department were able to make sure that LSU was always where they needed to be from an NIL standpoint with, the demand that DJ Pickett would command and the potential he would have at any of these schools he chose. Look, I think there was a time where he was an Oregon lead. And I think LSU, although they led most of his process, a visit to Oregon changed that, and LSU had to rally when a decision date came out and retake the lead. And then they got him in the fold and did everything right from there on out. Again, the relationship, the comfort level, getting the NIL in play. JD, what is the Vegas odds right now on LSU to win the national championship next year?
That's a great question, Steve. Off the top of the dome, don't have that for you. But I will say I like a lot. You look at the SEC. I'll pull this up as we're figuring this out. But when you talk about the rest of the SEC, there's not a ton of returning quarterbacks. Like Garrett Nussmeier is probably the best. Nico Imaliava back from Tennessee. But like Texas, they're one of the best odds to win the national. I think they're second to win the national championship is Texas. New quarterback. Georgia, new quarterback. Florida, you saw a snippet of what DJ Lagway was. So I think when you look across the SEC, we have Garrett Nussmeier, say we, myself personally on our show, we have Garrett Nussmeier as the second best returning starter in college football. So let me get back to you on the Vegas odds, but I like LSU a lot in the SEC.
Yeah, the way that they build their roster. Say that again, Steve?
2 flyer bets. Take Nussmeier for Heisman. Take LSU to win the national championship. Ooh. And I think this is a recruiting class that can kind of help them. I mean, the calling card of a Brian Kelly recruiting class is always the offensive line. It was a point of emphasis at Notre Dame. He coached some of the best offensive linemen that are still in the NFL at Notre Dame, from Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson, Ronnie Stanley. LSU's had some really good offensive lines. This offensive line class meets the standard. Running back Caden Durham is one of the best returning running backs in the SEC. Harlem Berry's our number 1 ranked running back, coming in with nearly 9,000 career rushing yards, 158 touchdowns, and nearly 1,000 yards receiving, and 12 more scores. But JT Lindsey's also electric. LSU's got the best running back class in the country because of him as well. 2,500 yards rushing, 33 touchdowns himself. He is one of the fastest players at the position in the country. This recruiting class helps support. DJ Pickett's going to be an instant impact player. The LSU's push for the national championship. And that's how sports work, right? Everybody at the end of the year taking a little comment or shot at Brian Kelly because of his comments for Notre Dame and why he left, and now Marcus Freeman's got them in the title game. This is kind of how sports work. Now LSU is going to have their time in the sun. They're going to have a great year. You're going to see them right at the end of the year next year, in my opinion. This recruiting class helping them along. Their coordinators are back for a second year, Coach Baker. I like the way it's setting up for the Tigers going into the spring ball and then the season.
Steve takes a village over here, but we got the odds for you. LSU is the 10th best odds to win the national title, plus 2,000. So for those of you all that don't know what that means, $100 wins you $2,000 if Brian Kelly and company hoist the hardware
so 1,000
in Miami.
wins you 200,000.
Say that again.
$1,000, turn it into $200,000.
$200,000.
Is that how that works?
I don't know if that's how that works.
I'm not great at
Oh,
math.
$1,000 he's saying. I thought he said
1,000.
100. I was like, I don't know if that's the way that it works in Vegas,
Yeah.
but here
So,
we go.
for
1,000,
those at
yeah,
home-
200,000.
For those at home keeping score, we have now taken the over on the Florida Gators 6.5 and the plus 2,000 on LSU winning the Natty.
How
Those
about-
are our way
I'm
too
just saying it's
early.
worth a shot. I'm not guaranteeing they win the title. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
these
like,
are our way
those are
too
fun
early
odds
national
to
signing
come
day
into the
picks.
season. Yeah.
I just love that Steve Wilfong is saying, hey, $1,000. Forget your petty cash of $100, JD. We're going $1,000 on LSU. I love that. I'm here for it, and $200,000 would not hurt anything for my bank account.
Sounds like a vote of confidence from Steve.
I'm in. I might do it while we're on the air.
I would do it with Steve's money.
That might be something I have to work with through some shady back channels. But Steve, I'll send you a link here asking about a toll you haven't paid yet on the highway, and I may have access to your bank account here soon.
Well, some of these freshmen are going to come in and make an instant impact. So LSU fans, you talk to us. Who do you think from this 2025 signing class is going to make an impact on the field for the Tigers in the 2025 season? Let us know. All right, JD, we got another team to talk about. It's the Tennessee Volunteers. We got Tennessee recruiting to discuss here. They finish with a top 10 class. Right in there at number 10. Nice even number, but they do something that they couldn't do last year, and that's land a prime-time offensive tackle. Last year, they miss on Jordan Seaton, maybe runner-up for Jordan Seaton, who went to Colorado and played at that left tackle position the entire season, something Tennessee really needs, and now David Sanders Jr. is going to do it. But they also got a really good defensive line class. I want to bring in Chad Simmons. Specifically, let's talk about Isaiah Campbell. He was a long-time Clemson commitment until he decommitted, and he made his final decision here on the On3 Recruits channel. But how talented is this defensive line class that they're building around Isaiah Campbell?
Yeah, huge flip for Tennessee there. I mean, obviously there was some communication going way back when you're still committed to Clemson, then open things up, and then they beat North Carolina, in the end for Isaiah Campbell. But it was impressive getting the top two players in North Carolina. When Tennessee's been great, they've done a great job recruiting that state of North Carolina over the years. And to get David Sanders 1, Isaiah Campbell 2 in North Carolina was huge for this class. But I can say this. I've seen Isaiah a few times, and kind of that grown man look. Just he looks about 30, physically developed, grown man, deep voice. Again, all about business. He's not about games, doesn't smile and laugh a lot, just wants to go to work, and he'll bring that mentality, that attitude to the D-line room under Rodney Garner at the University of Tennessee. And he's got active hands, strong hands, can disengage, can get up the field. He's a guy I think that saw a lot of good things on the Tennessee D-line this year under Rodney Garner and is excited about his future there in Neyland Stadium.
Yeah. Steve, when we talk about Tennessee, we know they're trying to build this roster, supplement some positions around Nico Imaliava. What do you like about what Tennessee did in 2025?
Well, I think they went out and signed the best tight end class in the country when you're talking about Deshaun Brame and Jack Van Dorselaere. These guys are big play guys at the position. Van Dorselaere, not as mainstream a name, but he's from South Lake Carroll in Texas, a two-way player for the Powerhouse program that averaged over 20 yards per catch as a junior. And then Deshaun Brame, Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Kansas, 14 receiving touchdowns. Also had a fantastic junior season with 13 touchdowns. These are guys, like when you talk about a Tennessee offense, they're going to go vertical, they're going to go over the top and really stretch the field. But these are tight ends that can really be a matchup problem for you in the middle of the field and on the perimeter. So that's what I love about this Tennessee class, top tight end duo in the land coming to Knoxville.
Yeah, there's a lot to love here. JD, what do you think Tennessee needs to do to take that next step while Nico is still under center?
I think the big thing for Tennessee is we had that flash in 2022 where you got Jalen Hyatt winning the Biletnikoff and there's, shots downfield and all that. And I think that's still who they would like to be, but I haven't seen a difference maker at the wide receiver position, really of that caliber of that group from 2022 since that season. And that's not saying that Jalen Hyatt guys grow on trees, but I think a Travis Smith, what they got in this class, you hope that he's able to get rolling pretty quickly. Mike Matthews, keeping him on that roster was huge. So Nico obviously has some fair share of the blame, but I need some guys to really put strain on defenses on the back end to get open. They are running the football, though, which I think is impressive.
And Mike Matthews can and should be one. I mean, I know he's not an addition that we're talking about in 2025, but he is kind of an addition because there was some speculation that he was going to hit the portal, and Tennessee had to go back and do what they did to land him. They had to recruit him again. So, you think that Mike Matthews steps into that wide receiver 1 spot, and then you could sprinkle a Travis Smith or a Darius Jackson, somebody that they signed in this 2025 class, and be a wide receiver 2, and like Steve said about the tight end group, that's going to help Nico a lot as a passer, getting some dynamic tight ends in there. So Tennessee fans, how do you guys feel about the roster? Is it in a spot where you need it for Nico to make that next step and make a run at a national championship? Let us know. Comment section below. All right. We are not ready to wrap up yet. I want to look at this top 20 real quick. Let's take a look at Texas at number 1. You got Georgia there at number 2. For a long time, we were all penciling Georgia in as who was going to finish number 1, but the Justus Terry to Texas move kind of shook all that up. Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State round out that top 5, like we just talked about. Tennessee in there at 10, and there was a fierce battle to get into that top 10. You had Florida, you had Notre Dame, Miami, all knocking on the door, and then you got Penn State, USC. They made late runs from around 20 to get to where they are. Oklahoma kind of slid. They had a top 10 class for much of the cycle. South Carolina, top 20. Missouri, Ole Miss, and Florida State round out that top 20. All right, let's take a look at some quarterback movement. You want to bring up the quarterbacks of 2025, the top 10 quarterbacks here. And something really interesting about the quarterback position. There was a lot of flips. You had 6 of the top 10 quarterbacks in 2025 flipped their commitment. Bryce Underwood, flip. Number 2, Keelan Russell, flip. Tavian Sinclair, committed since June of 2023. He's stuck. Houston Longstreet, flip. Deuce Knight, flip. Jerron Tuitele, flip. Julian Lewis, flip. Kamario Taylor committed to Mississippi State in October 2023. He sticks. Bryce Baker commits to UNC June of 2023. He sticks. Matt Zollers to Mizzou, April 2024. He sticks. So kind of the moral of the story here is you're either going to have your quarterback committed for a long time or he's going to flip.
I mean, it's vicious out there. It's extremely vicious. And I think what we're seeing with the NIL part of this, especially for a guy like a Bryce Underwood, like if you have a quarterback in the 12-team playoff, you're going to have a chance to make a run. Because in those situations, a lot of those teams can run the football. A lot of those teams play good defense. But when you have a guy who, when you have a similar roster to whoever's on the other sideline that can make the difference for you any Saturday, I'd be willing to pay big bucks for that. I'd be willing to, recruit a little bit through the whistle to try and get that guy to flip from wherever he's committed to. So the importance of that position is only growing. And I have a question for you, Josh. I thought in this new world of NIL, we would see less flips. I think, okay, more guys locked in. Okay, it's more potentially on paper. Are you surprised by how many flips we've seen this cycle?
Yeah, I think, it's because as it recruiting stands now, whatever they sign or agree to in terms of NIL, it's not binding. And I think we thought that maybe signing something, or agreeing upon an NIL deal would end up making these recruitments binding, but they're not, just like a verbal commitment. So I think we saw a lot of flips. One flip that we didn't see, one of the most shocking names on the list is Kamario Taylor. Chad, he was committed to Mississippi State in October of 2023. And there wasn't much buzz around him at the time he committed, or really for a year later. But down the stretch, programs like Georgia came in and offered. How did Mississippi State hold on to Kamario Taylor when all these other quarterbacks were flipping left and right?
It went back to old school recruiting relationships, man. The roots. He's a Mississippi kid. And we know if you cover recruiting like Steve and I and others do in this industry, Mississippi is a different place. Those guys are hard to pull out of that state. We saw Caleb Cunningham committed to Alabama. In the end, he flips and stays home to Ole Miss. Those guys love to stay home, stay close to their family, close to the hometown people. But in the end, this one kind of went back to the way recruiting was done years and years and years ago, with just the relationships, the connections, the comfortability. And he likes Jeff Lebby and his system and kind of how he fits into that scheme, and seeing a chance to play early. Of course, Georgia had his attention for a minute, but he never stepped foot on campus in Athens. So Mississippi State held on. And just to kind of add to what you were saying too, Josh, about the flips in quarterbacks. I mean, you had Antoine Hill, Colorado to Memphis. You had Brady Hart reclassified, Michigan to Texas A&M. Tramel Jones, Florida State to Florida. Tal Hawkins, TCU to SMU. So, and here we are now in 2026, and already Jared Curtis has decommitted from Georgia to kick off the 2026 class. So we're just getting started here in 2026 as well.
Yeah, perfect. So let's turn the page to 2026. Here are the players that you need to know as we turn the page from 2025 to 2026. And we'll start with number 1 overall player in the class, Jackson Cantwell. JD, I know this name, Jackson Cantwell, 6'7", 300-pound offensive tackle from the state of Missouri. That's where you like to get your offensive tackles.
The show me state, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Show me state action. Big people with small people.
Number 1 at his position, number 1 overall, and he cut his list down to a top 6 just 2 days ago. Steve Wiltfong, what do you like about Jackson Cantwell, and who are you leaning towards when it comes to his recruitment?
Well, obviously, he's a very versatile, athletic, explosive offensive tackle that's also arguably the top shot put and discus thrower in the country. He's looking to do both sports in college, but he's making a football decision. Georgia, Oregon, emerging at the top of the list, in my opinion. Michigan, right there, giving him a lot to think about. And then you have Missouri, Miami, and Ohio State programs that are also going to try and make a move with the next wave of visits.
All right. So after you get to Jackson Cantwell, I'm going to give you another player you need to know. And Chad hit on it earlier. Number 1 quarterback, Jared Curtis, 6'3", 225. These quarterbacks are getting big. Yeah. 6'3", 225. He's from Nashville. He's already committed and decommitted from Georgia. Chad, you've talked with Jared Curtis quite a bit. What do you make? How do you read his recruitment as we start this 26 cycle?
Yeah, I mean, Steve's done a great job here, too, talking with Jared and his father and the circle there. I mean, obviously, I think we're all kind of hearing the same schools as far as Oregon being a trendy pick right now for him. And then, of course, Georgia, they have the relationship. I know some people close to him really like Georgia, like Bobo, like Kirby Smart. I mean, you have the other teams involved like South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State's going to be in the mix as well. But I think you have to start with Oregon and Georgia based on what I'm hearing right now.
JD, who do you pick, Oregon or Georgia? If you're a recruit right now, that's a tough pick.
It's not, I mean, it's champagne problems, to be honest with you. I will say this: Oregon's track record at the quarterback position the last 2 seasons under Will Stein put up big numbers, have a trip to New York City to be a Heisman finalist. Not a bad deal. Yeah. Not a bad deal. Also wear a very cool Nike uniform.
Jared Curtis sitting pretty at number 1 QB with tons of options. Let's move on to Steve.
Well, guys, I've been talking to Jared Curtis and his family and sources all this week about his recruitment. Talking to Jared, I get the sense that it's Georgia with the momentum right now. That's what he's telling me, but he is still very excited about Oregon and South Carolina. With that being said, you talk to sources around Oregon. You talked to Jared last week. Oregon was a program that had a lot of momentum, so it's very fluid here. But I think with his ability, he's taken a lot of visits. All these coaches came to see him in his house. It'll be interesting to see if he starts to make a decision again here in the near future instead of going back out on the road.
All right, let's see if I can get you guys in a 3-box here. I want to talk to Chad and Steve about On3's number 1. So it's a little confusing, but On3 rankings, On3 industry rankings are different. On3's number 1 player in the country is edge Zion Ely, and he made an early commitment to Maryland. On3, not the company, but when I count to 3, I want you guys to raise your hands. Who thinks Zion Ely will sign with Maryland when it's all said and done? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Did you see any hands go up?
I did not.
I didn't see any hands go up either.
I bet JD did.
I was out of the box. Yeah,
you got a 4-box?
I'll leave that to y'all.
So there's a reason why. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Kevin Plank put his hand up.
Oh, Kevin Lang put his hands up. Now, but there is a reason why. I mean, this isn't just all jokes. Zion Ely commits to Maryland. Mike Locksley does a heck of a job recruiting, especially the DMV area. So we're not shaking a stick at this. Zion Ely is committed to Maryland, but what's going on here, Steve?
Well, he's still keeping some schools warm. Look, Zion Ely is maintaining that Maryland is leader. He's very committed to the Terps, and he's just going through his process like everybody else. We've just all covered recruiting for 20 years, but sometimes guys do stick. DJ Pickett does stick, with the program that he's been committed to for a long time. So, look, Maryland playing close to home, seeing what they've done with local products, having a lot of familiarity with guys in the locker room. He is excited about the Terps, but Auburn has done a great job with kids from St. Francis, signing 3 this past cycle. They're in it for him and his teammate, Javari Edwards. Oregon was a program that has led for Zion Ely at times. Texas A&M, Tennessee, Miami, Florida, some of the other programs that he's visited, continuing to have a relationship with. And then Penn State is a program, another one that's done a great job in the DMV historically, and certainly at his position that he's going to continue to keep warm.
Chad, if there's one program that you are watching when it comes to flipping potentially the number one On3's number one player, what team is it?
I mean, right now, today, answering this today on February, I would say Auburn. He was just there for the first time. In January, they signed multiple guys in 2025, already have one committed in 2026. Like Steve mentioned, Javari Edwards, a teammate at St. Francis Academy, high on Auburn as well. He's locked in an OV now to Auburn in mid-June. I would say that's the hot team today. In the summer, I would have said Oregon was the team, even trending as the top school. But today, I think Auburn's the biggest competition.
Really interesting there. All right, a couple more names that you guys need to know as we turn the page to 2026. Number 3 quarterback, Rider Lyons out of California. Steve, explain to the people, this is an interesting recruitment.
Well, I think schools are viewing Rider Lyons as a 2027 recruit right now because he plans to go on a mission before enrolling at the school of his choice. Chad Simmons and I have On3 RPMs in favor of the Trojans. We're certainly not sleeping on Oregon and some other programs for Rider Lyons. And with that, USC's recruiting Jonas Williams in the 2026 class. He's committed to Oregon from the Chicagoland, but he visited USC this past weekend. LSU's in the mix for Jonas Williams as well. So that's a 2026 quarterback recruitment that's heating up right now as well.
All right. Now, for those of you that remember the Keelan Russell recruitment from this year, he was a quarterback out of Texas that kind of blew up, made an early commitment to SMU, ends up signing with Alabama, ends up being Gatorade Player of the Year. Well, I got a name for you guys to write down if you enjoyed that recruitment. Navy All-American MVP Keyshawn Henderson. JD, number 15 overall, and made an early commitment.
Every day, calling him every day. They're trying to get him a spring visit set up. Right now, he's telling me he has no plans to be anywhere in the spring other than Houston. I do expect him to be somewhere, but the question is who can get him on their campus? Is it Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss? Is it Hugh Freeze and Auburn? Is it an in-state school like Texas A&M or Texas? I mean, who can? Is it SMU? I mean, I think that's the biggest question: is does he take visits, and if so, who does he take visits to? Because right now, again, he's saying he's locked in. Other guys tell me he's recruiting them to Houston, and he's saying and doing all the right things today. But he'll be one for sure that we watch extremely closely in the coming months.
All right, so Steve, when it comes to 2026, there's a couple other names we're watching. Number 1 wide receiver, Chris Henry Jr. Yeah, he's solidly committed to Ohio State, but why are we focused on the number 1 wide receiver in America? Steve?
We lost him.
Oh, we lost Steve.
We lost him.
Well, one of the reasons we can go to Chad on Chris Henry Jr. Steve, Chad, you there?
Yep.
All right. What's up with Chris Henry Jr.?
Well, today I know our guy Max Torres, who lives out there in the LA area, is at his practice at Mater Dei, and Chris Henry is decked out in Oregon gear, sweatpants, hoodie. So what does that mean? We know, look, Oregon is for real. And I've said this before. Oregon is for real in this race. He keeps going back to Eugene. He was there during the season. He was there in January. He was at USC this past weekend. I don't see USC right now as a big competition for Ohio State. But look, man, he's from Ohio. Brian Hartline, that room, that development, that resume speaks for itself. I talked to someone who's very close to Chris Henry over the weekend. They feel, if they had to guess in the end, that he sticks with Ohio State. But I have some people tell me they feel he ends up at Oregon. So I think right now it's a battle, and it's a real battle, and it'll probably be a battle until they sign papers in December. But Oregon, with Junior Adams, he loves that personality. Those guys talk about watches and jewelry and shoes and just kind of things not that are football. And Chris likes that, and he's an elite player. He's committed to Ohio State. They are the number one team right now, but Oregon is right there knocking on that door, and I think it'll be this way until the end.
All right, there it is. You guys need to lock in. 2026 recruiting is here. It's going to be a blast. We are going to cover it all year on this channel, so jump on board, hit subscribe if you have not. JD, we are here. Today is signing day. It's a great day. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of excitement in the air. A lot of these teams feel like they've tinkered with their rosters right to where the point where they're ready to make a run. It's a great feeling today, isn't it?
It's awesome just to think about in a matter of months. We're talking about a lot of these guys gearing up for spring football. Hey, how does Julian Lewis look at Colorado? Hey, what's going on out there at Ohio State with their early enrollees, and can they repeat? So just the cyclical nature of it is so fun. So for us to now turn the page and see these guys in college uniforms, not from a photo shoot, but from practice, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and this is our third cycle, you and I, covering recruiting here at On3. You guys have been awesome. Appreciate you guys. Who's been tuned in to all three of our signing day shows? Let us know how long you've been a fan of the On3 Recruits channel, and we will see you guys back here very soon because there's a lot to talk about.